This is the Palm Beach County Planning Commission for the March 11th, 2022 meeting. We will call this meeting to order at 9 a.m. Precious, may we please have a roll call?
Sarah Pardue. John Carr. Rick Stopik.
Here.
Barbara Roth. Here. Dagmar Bras. Here. Penny Pompey.
Present.
Glenn Groman.
Here.
Spencer Siegel.
Present.
Lori Vinegar.
Here.
Kylie Harper Larson.
Here.
Marcia Hayden. Angela Van. Angela Van. Okay. Edwin Ferguson.
Present.
Eric Royal.
Here.
We have quorum.
Okay, thank you. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have proof of publication?
Yes, sir, we do.
All right, thank you. Can we now vote to allow remote participation for those on WebEx due to the extraordinary circumstances related to the COVID-19 pandemic?
I'll motion to allow that.
Do we have a second? Second. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes without opposition. Do we have any postponements on the agenda?
No, Chair, we do not.
All right, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? All right, have a motion by Commissioner Pompey. May I have a second, please? All right, second by Commissioner Stopik. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion also passes without opposition. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes for, when was our last meeting?
January 14th, I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, thank you. Motion by Commissioner Vinegar. May we have a second? Second also by Commissioners Roth and Stopik simultaneously. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes without opposition. We'll now turn to comments by the public. We have two cards. Mr. Drew Martin, please come to the podium that's to my right. And Ms. Linda Smith, please come to the podium to my left. And 3 minutes will be their allotted time. Thank you.
Just let me know when you want me to start.
Whenever you're ready, sir.
Okay. Drew Martin, I'm here on behalf of the Loxahatchee Group of the Sierra Club. And I'm just going to speak in general about why agriculture is important, because I know when we get to the flu, we're going to be just very looking at these specific requests. And we're not going to really talk about, I'm assuming maybe you'll bring it up, how this will impact the agriculture in the Ag Reserve. Now, I saw a presentation by Clyde Butcher, and he's a great photographer, and he took a lot of pictures. And, you know, he's taken pictures all throughout the Loxahatchee Wildlife Refuge. And that refuge would be very damaged if we go forward with a lot of these proposals. Now, one of the arguments which we hear often is that these are small properties, too small to farm. That's not really true, because you can farm small properties. In a lot of urban areas, they are actually farming small properties. When I lived in California, I had a huge vegetable garden, and it was on, you know, a couple hundred square feet, maybe at most. And I grew all kinds of stuff, artichoke, corn, asparagus. And, you know, so this argument that, oh, well, we can just sacrifice all these small properties. Now, I also want to talk about housing booms and busts. I'm reading a book by Michael Lewis called Boomerang. And he talks about how in Ireland they had a huge housing boom. And the price of housing went up and up and up and up. And then, of course, it came down, because ultimately housing doesn't go up all the time. And so that creates this false demand, and people are going to get up and say things like, oh, there's no housing, nobody can find this, nobody can find that. But that may just be because right now, hedge funds are buying up single-family houses. And so, you know, they want to buy my house all the time. They're on the phone every other day. Can we buy your house? Cash. Of course, I'm like, well, where am I going to live if you buy my house? But they don't care where I'm going to live because they just want to buy my house as an investment. But the point is that this is all kind of, it gets to be a false demand. And then people are going to say, oh, look at, you know, there's no place to live. Well, that's really not going to be true maybe in a number of years because we're going to build all this. And if we are going to build and build and build, it should be along the urban corridors.
Thank you.
And it should be inexpensive housing, like Section 8, which people can afford. Now, a lot of people think Section 8 means really poor people. It really doesn't. A lot of people think workforce helps poor people. It really doesn't either. Because how many poor people can afford a $300,000 home? I couldn't. I don't consider myself poor, but I couldn't. So these are things I hope you'll have in the back of your mind when you look at this flu amendment and these general topics. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Linda Smith. I'm from Jupiter, Florida. I'm a retired architect and USGBC lead professional. I'm also going to speak in general about the Ag Reserve and just preservation in general. I am not against farmers trying to sell their land. They can sell to the appropriate buyers that are approved in the venues that are already existing in zoning categories. I own a single-family home. I can't sell to a commercial high-rise. It goes against the rules of the intelligent existing zoning laws. I realize that the Ag Reserve has been degraded and degraded by small cuts for years through meetings like this, and I did not attend, and that is bad on me. You folks, staff, Planning Commission, can rightly say, where were you, Linda, when the page was blank? Where were you when we started? I was not present. I was working, raising a family, volunteering on professional organizations like AIA and the Construction Specification Institute. That's CSI, but it's not the TV show. I'm retired now, and I'm going to try to be more present in the future. I even brought donuts, and I might bring them from time to time. I don't know if you're allowed food here, but maybe it goes upstairs to staff or whatever. I know each of you folks take your jobs and responsibilities seriously, both the commissioners and the staff members. All I can do is ask you to think long-term, not short-term. The adage, if you build it, they will come, is very true in all of Florida. You don't have the responsibility to fix all of Florida. You do have the responsibility to try to fix Palm Beach County, and that's all I can ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. I have a few comments. So welcome back, everybody. It feels like we've been gone for
Mr.
forever.
Chair,
Yes.
just wanted to make a comment that that lady and her donuts should be welcome at every meeting.
I don't know if my waistline would second that, but whatever works for the group is fine with me. Now, as far as my comments, I'll keep them brief. Just wanted to, again, welcome everybody back. It seems like it's been forever since we've had a chance to work together. Looking forward to us having a productive relationship over this next, I guess, however much is left of this particular year, 9 months, as far as the chair position. Just a small housekeeping matter. So remember, everybody, that I asked that we limit our comments to when there are actual motions on the floor. That's just to kind of make sure that we keep the meeting moving expeditiously as possible, and also keep it as concise. We know the staff is well prepared. We know the applicants are well prepared as well. And I think that the appropriate time of the meeting for us to comment is when we actually have a motion on the floor. So whenever the applicant is making its presentation or staff is making their presentation, remember to limit your conversations with them to the forms of questions. Now, obviously, staff and the applicant can reply to comments from the public on a given agenda item, but as far as our comments, I ask that we limit that to whenever there's an actual motion on the floor. Vice Chair, to that point, what I'd like us to do is to also limit our comments to approximately 2 minutes on a given matter. So I ask that you kind of keep track of that time. Now, obviously, we're not going to cut your mic off if you're going, 2 minutes and 15 seconds or whatever the case may be. But the point is to try to move the meeting along expeditiously as possible. Obviously, if there's an amendment to the motion, then again, if you have something to say, then it will be an additional 2 minutes. But I ask for your consideration of that, and let's see how it goes. If there's any real issues, then we can address it at a later time. Yes, Commissioner Roth.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the welcome back. Good to see everyone. My only question is that there are times during a presentation, either by staff or by the developer, where we certainly do have an opportunity to ask questions. There also are times when someone who has spoken to an issue brings up something. In other words, not staff, not the presenter, but one of our visitors. I know in the past we've gained knowledge if we've had the opportunity to ask that person a question. I hope that will continue to be the case. Because for me, it's not just staff, and they are marvelous, and it's not just our, very well-trained disciplines who are here, but it's also the public. Sometimes I know I need a little give and take with the public. I hope that will be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just say, just for full transparency, I'm following the playbook, if you will, that Patricia Ben gave me before she left. So her written instructions were that we follow the policy that I just set forward. So if there's that extraordinary or rare circumstance, because I have not seen that happen on a monthly basis, but if there is something, Commissioner Roth, that you find to be unique, and you want to ask on that limited situation, please let's discuss it before we launch into that. But I would prefer that we limit our comments to when there's an actual motion on the floor. But what you said is well received. All right, so without any further ado, let's turn to the business of today's meeting. So we have Amendment Round 22B, County Proposed Text and Map Series Amendments. First is 3A1, Commerce Future Land Use Designation. Do we have a presentation by an applicant, or is this just a staff presentation?
This will just be a staff presentation, and Lisa Amaro will be making this presentation. I just wanted to make two quick notes. Angela Van did join via WebEx at 9:02.
All right.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And also, I just wanted to provide just a little background before we jump right into the presentation, because there are so many items that you all hear, and there's initiation, there's transmittal, there's adoption. So I just wanted to kind of lay out for 2 minutes the history of the Commerce Flu that we'll be talking about. So at the May 5th, 2021 BCC comprehensive hearing, under board discussion at the end of that hearing, because there were a lot of items within the agricultural reserve, the concept of a new light industrial future land use was brought up, and the board had asked for that to be explored. And then they went on to a number of other topics and requested a BCC workshop. That agricultural reserve workshop was held in October of last year, and one of the consensus items that came out of that was this light industrial future land use. So then that was back before the Planning Commission in January for initiation. It was recommended to initiate to the Board of County Commissioners. Then at the February BCC Comprehensive Plan hearing, that item was initiated. So now here in March, as we're gearing up for transmittal of the item at the May BCC Comprehensive Plan hearing, now we're here for your recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners prior to that hearing. So I just wanted to give that little background, and now I'll turn it over to Lisa for her presentation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm over here from this podium so I could see the slideshow. As you know, I'm now zoning director. I'm not in the planning division. It's lovely to see you all this morning, and it's lovely to be presenting this item that is a little bit different than typical items that are before you. Typically, there is an applicant here and staff, and the applicant presents, staff presents, and the board is in a position of making a decision of a recommendation of approval or denial typically, or approval with modifications or such. This is a little bit different because this is a county-initiated text amendment. Many times over the past several years, you have seen amendments before you that were privately proposed, and the applicant was here saying, here are texts that we've proposed, and we want to move this forward with initiation, and it's specifically related to a specific piece of property. This amendment today is not related to any one specific property, which gives us a little bit more freedom in our dialogue today and our recommendation, both from staff and the Planning Commission and the board. So I'm going to get started. And this is a brand new mouse. Thanks, guys. I don't know which button. Oh, that one. Okay, again, as Kevin recapped, this is a county-initiated text amendment stemming from dialogue and workshop with the board. There's two components, two really distinct components. One is creating a new future land use designation called Commerce. The members of this board that have been around for a while have noticed inside the urban-suburban tier, we have specific and strict commercial location criteria. However, industrial land use inside the urban-suburban tier does not have any location criteria. So for a while, maybe 10 or 15 years, we've kicked around the idea of making a new FLU for light industrial development inside the urban service area. And that was part of our dialogue when we went forward with the board with the Ag Reserve, looking at all of the industrial requests that were coming in. Maybe it's time to have a light industrial category. I have not received any negative feedback at all at creating that FLU. We have a lot of dialogue and feedback from interested parties on the Ag Reserve item. So I hear mumbling, but this is not public comment time. So as far as industrial future land use designations in the county as a whole, as you all know, we're unincorporated county only. We have two categories. One's called industrial, and in industrial you can do any kind of industrial development that you would like, subject to the Unified Land Development Code. It could be light, it could be heavy. It's only allowed in the urban-suburban tier, in the agricultural reserve tier. You can't do industrial development in the rural, exurban, or glades, kind of the EAA area. Only in the urban-suburban tier in the east and in the glades. There's about 13,500 acres in unincorporated county. There's also an economic development center. Way back in the 90s, we thought it was really great to have kind of a campus-style industrial development, so we created Economic Development Center. We have several of these projects. Not all of them are built. It's kind of a campus office research park, and it has minimum acreage requirements. It's a little complicated for applicants. That's why it's not particularly popular as a land use designation. We do have 461 acres of that. So here's a map that shows all of the kind of hubs of industrial in unincorporated county. The gray area is municipalities, and we didn't map out at the industrial lands in the cities. Those yellow circles are the hot spots for industrial in unincorporated county, and I'll go through each one. There's a handful of other ones, teeny ones outside those circles, but those are our main ones. So there's the North County. If you're familiar with what was Pratt Whitney, Palm Beach Park of Commerce, which is Florida Research Park. There's Moroso Speedway there in red, which is an item coming through the Zoning Commission right now with a new name called Portman. But this is industrial development. What's interesting about this area is a lot of the industrial in the triangle paper-looking hat shape is preserved. That's not developable. This was things that were done way back in the 50s from the United Technologies overlay. That's not really developable land. On the right side, however, in the Florida Research Park, that is developable. In the zoning division, I can tell you we have a lot of applications coming in that area. It's pretty great. So here's the Glades area of the county. This is in that dashed black and white line. That is the Glades urban-suburban tier. Excuse me. There's two primary areas in there. Does this have a laser? Oh, this is the inland port that was approved several years ago. It's currently in agricultural production right now. And this is largely sugarcane, and there's a major processing sugarcane facilities within this shape. This is in the sugarcane protection area overlay in this area here. This is some industrial. There's Lake Okeechobee. This is West County in the Glades area. And the gray area is the municipalities in this photo of South Bay and Belglade. We also have a major industrial area next to Riviera Beach. Everything in gray, again, the lighter gray is municipalities. So the colors are unincorporated land, and there's a major industrial area there, very well built out, and that's near Silver Beach Road, Blue Heron, along the train tracks and I-95. And then this is probably the heart and soul of the industrial right now in Palm Beach County as far as built and operating. And we are, in this map, we're right here. We're right there. That's the Vista Center. This is a planned industrial park. And then we have Duke is fairly new. This is another new development there. I believe it's called Liberty. There's a lot of industrial development through here. This is kind of the hub of where a lot of our industrial is in the county. And it's in the flight path of the airport. And there's also some airport buyout area over here in blue. This also has the ability for industrial development. We have a lot of applications in over there. And again, this light color is cities. So that's kind of a snapshot of where we have industrial today in unincorporated county. And we also have industrial in the Ag Reserve. This is an area that's along Atlantic Boulevard and State Road 7. This industrial here predates the master plan. It predates the 1989 plan. Again, this is State Road 7 and Atlantic. This one is new. This is Sunflower that was before you last year. This applicant came forward saying we need an opportunity and an ability to expand our landscape service uses. And that's something that, another item that has brought this before us today is that there has been changes over the past maybe 4 years for landscape service in the Ag Reserve that tightened up some of the rules. And in Heritage Farms, it's, you know, often we'll have Heritage Farms issues before the boards. It's conversations like that that has led us to discussing and creating a FLU that could fit. And going back to this map here, there's not a lot of industrial in unincorporated county in the areas of West Boynton, West Delray, West Boca. And what we heard during the landscape service conversations is there's not a lot of light industrial or industrial in this area of the county. And as you could see in the map, it's kind of correct. So the idea was initially to create an urban-suburban tier, and here is the tier boundary in black and white. So half of this amendment is to create a light industrial land use designation to provide small businesses to come before you and ask through the legislative process to get a light industrial future land use designation that, you know, everywhere in this urban suburban area, every single parcel has a neighbor. There's not a lot of land left for development in unincorporated county in this space. Processing site-specific amendments for industrial is going to bring up compatibility concerns and impacts. That's why we think it's time to have a light industrial land use designation so we can allow property owners to come in for some light industrial uses. So there we are with Exhibit 1A, which is the first half, inventing a commerce designation for light industrial uses. No heavy uses and no auto repair. This is something else that's important, is right now in regular industrial FLU, future land use, you can do auto repair. You can do a lot of the auto repair bodywork uses that you're allowed in commercial. So any particular piece of property that comes in and they want to do a Tire Kingdom, we wouldn't process that amendment in the urban suburban tier if it's mid-block because it doesn't meet the commercial location criteria. However, they can ask for industrial and then there's no location criteria, and that creates a conundrum that, you know, really we need to be requiring the same location criteria for a Tire Kingdom, and I hate to call, you know, any auto repair, tire repair, any name brand, Tires Plus, whatever. We need to be looking as the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners and staff as these uses with the same playing field of commercial criteria. So part of the idea of the Commerce FLU is to not allow commercial uses in this commerce designation. For commercial related uses should be at the intersections and subject to the commercial location criteria. Again, this is the urban suburban tier. So again, I talked about the landscape service and the demand for this small business. You know, this is another idea to address. So what we're proposing is location criteria for this new designation to require that if a site wants to come in and have actually either industrial or commerce that they're along an arterial roadway. We have arterial roadway requirements for commercial, but we do not have for industrial right now, and I don't know why, but it's not there. Also, this new FLU would use, in the urban service area, would use the same floor area ratio as the industrial or the economic development center. It establishes that this designation would be consistent with IL zoning and MUPD zoning. This is to avoid us having to make a new zoning district. We don't need to make a new zoning district. We just need to define the uses that are available in this FLU. And this Exhibit 1A is only for in the urban suburban tier. And the idea is that we would continue to look at the uses, and when we came back for adoption with the board, we would have the proposed ULDC language that matched, that said these uses are light, these ones are not allowed, and such. So this is staff's attempt at starting that dialogue, and I regret that we didn't put this in the staff report. This is from the Sunflower staff report that didn't make it over into the staff report you today. This is our attempt at starting that dialogue at what uses would be light, what uses would be heavy, and this is our first blush at that one. And we would add this to the board for the May report. Add this to the staff report, rather, for the May report. So, going into Exhibit 1B, and Ag Reserve. Currently, there are no limitations or location requirements for industrial in the Ag Reserve today. And if this amendment doesn't go forward for the Ag Reserve, the Planning Division will continue to process amendments for industrial in the Ag Reserve and bring them before you, because there's no prohibition for industrial. What this amendment is, and the consultants proposed economic development centers back in '99. They proposed 350,000 square feet at I think that's cumulative, at Boynton and the Turnpike and Atlantic and the Turnpike. And when the board saw that with the master plan, they said, no, we don't want to. We don't want to have any new industrial in the tier. However, they didn't add policy language to prohibit it. We already had 60 plus acres in the tier, so we couldn't ban it because so we kept language in the plan for those existing 60 acres that I showed on the map earlier. And we didn't ban it. Therefore, when applicants come forward and they say we want industrial with the tier, you will see applications like Sunflower and Las Farmas that are utilizing the rules that are in place today that allow individual applicants to apply for industrial. These sites don't need a text amendment to the plan, and a preserve requirement of the 60% only applies if they're doing a multiple use plan development. If they're applying with an industrial flue and light industrial zoning, there is no specific words in the plan that require a preserve. It is up to staff to make that recommendation, as we've done with prior amendments. Also, the industrial land use designation has a full range of industrial uses, everything from heavy industry to hazardous waste to anything it wants to, which is why you'll recall with Sunflower last summer and Las Farmas, the applicants and staff worked together to have conditions of approval that banned toxic uses or heavy industry and such. And the reason we're proposing a commerce flue and policies in the plan is to head it off on head these requests off on a holistic level and not to address them on a case-by-case basis. The other thing, auto repair, like I talked about, in the Ag Reserve, there's a commercial cap. There is a commercial cap on square footage. It's been very much debated and discussed and incrementally increased over the years. Any of the industrial uses that come before you in the Ag Reserve with an industrial flue, staff would say are subject to the commercial cap. However, the applicant could argue against that, and then it's up to the board to make that decision because the words aren't that specific. And the final thing is, a lot of the zoning for IL and IG, a lot is permitted uses. As you saw from those maps of where our industrial land is, they're in these large chunks of land where not only is the subject site industrial, all the neighbors are industrial. So a lot in the zoning code, a lot of the uses are P for permitted. They just come right in for manufacturing and processing regardless of what it is. With this ability to do this amendment, we're looking at refining the code and the plan to require that they have a DRO approval and a site plan that comes before the board, so the board could really see what we're approving with the list of uses and in addition to the light and industrial heavy. So this is a slide of some of the applications that have come before us. There's been 279 acres proposed for industrial in the Ag Reserve since 2016. 280 acres of those have been adopted. Some have been with text amendments, some have been just through future land use amendment. This has the status of all of them. And again, this is why we're here. This is in responding to the forces of market and industry and applications. This is, what led to the conversation with the workshop with the board. And again, okay, so for the specific policies, we've looked at 4 areas. We've looked at uses for the Ag Reserve, and we're looking at limiting the uses to light only with no commercial uses. We're looking at the preserve area. We're proposing that we specify in the plan that if you are doing an industrial development, 16 acres or greater,
that you have a 60% preserve. And we are taking that 16 acres from the commercial rules because staff's opinion is that all residential has a 60% preserve unless you're doing one house per 5 acres, and all commercial greater than 16 acres has a preserve. So staff is recommending we keep that continuity with prior board decisions that the board decided previously, even back to the 80s, that 1 unit per acre in the ag reserve should have a 60% preserve minimum. And then the board decided in 2015, 2016, that if a site with commercial was greater than 16 acres, it should have preserve. So we're keeping that continuity with prior plans and decision making. The other one is location. We're proposing that they're limited to the arterial roadways of State Road 7, Boynton Beach Boulevard, Atlantic Boulevard, and we're proposing between State Road 7 and the Turnpike. And the reason we're proposing that is because those are the roadways on the thoroughfare identification map and on the federal functional classification map of roads. We are proposing that for continuity with the same type of sites within the urban suburban tier. Now, there is a request that we received for the Planning Commission and the board to continue extending that west and to the end of Boynton Beach Boulevard and the end of Atlantic. You know, that's something in a policy decision by the board that the Planning Commission can recommend and the board could approve, and will modify the policy accordingly, provided that they meet the non-planned collector standards that are required by the ULDC. Staff for scale, we propose a 5-acre minimum. We did not and we got that from the multiple use plan development standard for industrial as 5-acre minimum. And we feel that if you're going to do a non-residential site, you should, in the ag reserve, you should have adequate land area to have adequate buffers. We didn't propose a cap for any individual properties, but that is something that has been proposed by COBRA, and that is something that could be recommended by the Planning Commission and adopted by the board. Staff just didn't have any data and analysis to come up with a magic number, so we didn't propose one. That doesn't mean that we're not opposed to having a cap on a site, and we didn't propose a cap for the tier as a whole. There is a commercial cap of $1,015,000 for commercial uses. Staff didn't propose a cap for industrial uses for square footage, but that is not to say that the board or the Planning Commission couldn't recommend one. We also didn't bring into this conversation local versus regional. Currently, the Ag Reserve limits non-commercial and mixed uses to only local, not regional. We didn't get into that conversation with the staff report, but it's definitely something that the board could direct us. Don't do regional uses at the Turnpike and Atlantic. Cap the uses. All of those, are things that the Board of County Commissioners can direct. Staff just didn't have, it's not a data kind of thing, it's kind of a policy decision, so staff didn't make a recommendation on that, but if there was, we wouldn't necessarily oppose. So again, there's options to consider today. We are going to be asking for 2 different motions, one for the commerce as a whole and one for the ag reserve. And the reasons for that is because we don't have any opposition for commerce flu in the urban suburban tier. It's kind of unfortunate we put the 2 in one report, but there's no reason why you can't have 2 motions and we could bifurcate it into 2 pieces. So for the ag reserve, there's options for you today. You can recommend, and just like the code outlines the ability for the Planning Commission to make recommendations or take action. You could recommend denial today, but what will happen with that, if the board, that's a recommendation, if the board doesn't adopt changes to set policy guidance in the ag reserve, amendments will still be accepted by the planning division and they will still move forward. So within the absence of policy guidance, planning will be processing amendments. It will be status quo. We will talk about the uses on a case-by-case basis, just like we did with Las Farmas and Sunflower and all the past applications. You could recommend approval. If you do, staff is recommending 60% preserve over 60 acres. We've received requests from interested parties that are saying increase that to 50 acres, and they provided an attachment we added to the report. In our opinion, 16, 50, 0, those are policy decisions by the board. There's no mathematical formula in our opinion that could make that judgment. That is a recommendation by staff on past board action and decisions. So we're recommending 16. You can entertain the 50 and choose what you want to recommend from that. The other, I talked about State Road 7 and Atlantic. We were being consistent with the urban suburban tier and keeping it to the federal functional classification map. However, the board could recommend, extending west of State Road 7. We also have that. Other things that came in overnight, you have a Cobra letter before you. Cobra, I believe, is requesting a cap of 10 acres. They'll speak to their recommendation. If the board wanted to recommend a cap, staff has no opposition to that. It's just something that we didn't have in our packet. So those are the options for the board. We sent this out through the Intergovernmental Plan Amendment Review Committee and through our email chain of over 200 interested parties. Email list that we have. We've got comments back from Robert Hartzell, from Cobra, from property owners within the Ag Reserve, such as Mr. O'Donnell. We have comments from property owners in the Ag Reserve that are looking to do industrial or a type of industrial. We've included what we've had at your dais or in the packet. And again, here's our staff recommendation. We recommend approval. We would like to add, though, approval with modifications on 2 of those. For the commerce in the urban-suburban tier part, which is 1A, we did receive a comment from the public that what you're seeing on the board there could be considered as restrictive, and that wasn't the intent. So we're proposing to incorporate changes today if it to clarify that commercial recreation is already allowed in industrial. We wanted to expand that a little bit to say also within buildings you can do fitness centers and it's okay. We didn't mean to limit it to only indoor, so we're proposing some minor tweak there to add the words including but not limited to. We would like you to incorporate that in a motion if you go with approval on the first part. And then on the second part, we also have an oversight. We really believe that in the Ag Reserve, not only do we need the concurrent zoning application, but that we need the site plan in order to look at the design, scale, character of the tier with the individual sites coming forward. So those would be the 2 requests. And like I said, if you would like to take them as 2 independent motions, I think that'll be a lot simpler for conversation because, again, I regret that it's not 2 reports, but it would be really redundant if we put it all in one. But there's no problem with taking 2 recommendations on the 2 different themes: commerce, new flu, urban-suburban tier, and then how do you address industrial in the Ag Reserve. And thank you.
Thank you. We have 17 public comments. So I'm going to call 4 people's names.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I apologize for the interruption, but I was considering, as I understand that most of these comments are going to be on the second part, I was wondering if perhaps we could, as a housekeeping matter, we could take care of the first part in the commercial tier and then take comments and do the vote on the second part. I'm not sure if I'm out of order for making that, but I'd like to move at this time that we approve 1A and have discussion on that matter.
Can't do that.
These all say 3A1, sir. So I'm not going to presume that they're here on 3A2. I would imagine that they would have known to write 3A2. These all say 3A1. So
Fair enough.
yeah. So we're going to go to public comments now. We have 17 comments, persons who want to speak on apparently item 3A1. If you were intending to speak on item 3A2, which is the coastal high hazard area updates, please say so before you speak, and we'll just delay your discussion until the appropriate time, as Commissioner Siegel has suggested.
I think you misunderstood.
Maybe so.
I think what my discussion was, we're looking for approval with modifications of 1A, which is about the commercial urban tier,
Okay.
where we had, I think, little or no opposition. And then we have the 1B motion, where there is significant opposition. I was thinking perhaps we should take care of the first matter and then take care of the second matter. I guess that we.
But how will we know?
Communication.
But
Chair,
how
if
will we know
I
what
may,
they're?
You can't.
Yeah,
Real quick.
sure.
So it is put as one item on the agenda, so there's no way to know,
Exactly.
based on the comment card
Yeah.
submittal, if what particular component of the item they want to speak to. What we're recommending is, because there's kind of 2 main components. One is the creation of this new future land use designation, commerce, and then as a subcomponent, if you all want a separate motion to address it within the agricultural reserve, that would be a second motion, but I don't see a way to.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying, but
We couldn't move to bifurcate that right now, as it was suggested, and go ahead and vote on that?
no.
Yeah, that was my thought as well. So we have 17 public comment cards on item 3A1. What I'm going to do is call 4 names. So the first 2 persons, the first person, if you please come to the podium to my right, the second person to my left. After the first person finishes his or her comments, the third person can step to the podium. After the second person finishes his or her comments, the fourth person I call can step to the podium to my left as well. So we have Mr. Jim Frogner. Please step to the podium to my right. Samuel Centrone, please step to the podium to my left. Then after Jim is done, Frogner is done, that is, Drew Martin, please come to the podium. And then after Mr. Samuel Centrone is done, Linda Smith, please come to the podium. Please start whenever you're ready. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. My name is Jim Frogner. I live in Stewart, Florida. I've done business in Palm Beach County and resided here for the past 40 years. Lisa did a great job. I love everything I heard about the new commercial zoning. I want to mention the recent Lake Worth Drainage District purchase of all the, giving all the canals to GL Homes for the transfer development rights. I know that's a little off schedule on this amendment, but I always thought that I could put thousands of still homes on those canals. So that wasn't going to happen. But with regards to the commercial land use designation, it's long overdue. I get calls almost every day from people asking, can I have my business in my home? I do eBay. I need to put a storage building up. I live in a residential neighborhood. Can I do that? That sort of thing. So I think this amendment is long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Whenever you're ready.
Good evening. I'm here to talk against the future land use commerce because certain adverse scenarios have affected us. We have a recent intergovernmental panel of climate change, and it reports of irreversible impacts of global warming and that humans and nature are being pushed beyond their capabilities to adapt. The hope is that if temperatures is kept below 1.5 centigrade before pre-industrial levels, it will reduce projected losses. The report points out that this is the decade of action if we are going to turn things around. Heat is killing more people, drought is killing more trees, and warming oceans are killing more coral reefs. But without action, worse is coming, the report says. The assessment could be seen as one of the most important in human history. It was produced by more than 1,000 physical and social scientists and unanimously approved by the governments of 195 nations. So this is very important. Why do we have to keep changing commercial? I believe the agri-reserve should be all agricultural. And if you have a little room, why not plant endangered species of flowers and provide some habitat for birds as in their migratory path to the continental U.S. We should establish urban growth centers, development, and keep businesses in there. We need to think globally and act locally. The board issue, when the bond issue was issued for this ag reserve, there was no mention about let's make an exception here, let's make a zoning change here. Let's keep it the way it was. That's what the voters voted for. We have Lisa Intergelandi of the Everglades Law Center has experience that we're continuing to undermine and gut the original intent of the ag reserve. Let's stick with the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Drew Martin. I'm here. I'm waiting for. There you go. I'm here on behalf of the Loxahatchee Group of the Sierra Club, and staff said there was no objection, but I wasn't sure what that came from because we see right here in the letter from Robert Hartzell, written by Heidi Mahaffrey, Esquire, that for the reasons set forth herein, Thousand Friends of Florida and Sierra Club Loxahatchee Group respectfully request that Planning Commission recommend denial of initiating the Commerce Blue designation. So that sounds to me like an objection. So you know, the problem is, and I actually sat on a lot of these subcommittees, and I have been actively participating in this. And, you know, the landscaping industry does need some places to go, but the problem is that the ag reserve is being kind of picked piece by piece apart. And these are not really ideal for agriculture. Now, we allow nurseries to have some landscaping services on their properties, and I believe that's going to be allowed. So I'm not sure why you need this flu designation. I'm also very concerned with anything that does away with the 60% requirement that you preserve land. Why is that? Because when you set a cap and you say, well, we're only going to do this for things under 16 acres, so somebody's going to buy all the land and they're going to break it down into 16-acre plots so they don't have to preserve anything. And that's the problem. The whole purpose of the 60% was so that you would preserve agriculture. So why would you change that? Why do you need to change that? If people can't successfully develop a piece of property because they can't make it work, because they can't set aside 60%, why is that the concern of the commission? That's the market. If the market, you know, isn't hot enough to drive that, then, you know, they'll come back when it is. I am concerned that a lot of this is being driven by, you know, kind of these real estate booms, and you get all these pushes for people to do all this development, but you're really not looking at the ultimate traffic. You're not looking at the ultimate congestion. You're not looking at the ultimate drainage. You're not looking at the impacts to the wildlife refuge. You're not looking at how agriculture is an important part of our economy. Because what you look at is you get, you know, this becomes very much to fill the needs of certain developers. Obviously, developers always want to develop. So we know that. But the job of the county is to set the rules so that the land looks good when they're done. So that the people who paid $1 million, $500,000, $700,000 to live out there can enjoy living there. And they're not going to do that if you continue to put out industrial and commerce beyond the caps that are already set. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Linda Smith, still live in Jupiter, Florida. I actually wrote this before the comments that were made. It's interesting that the next item to discuss is the coastal high hazard amendments. After reducing our resiliency by reducing preserve areas in our county, both in the Ag Reserve, in the Indian Trails, and I guess now in the suburban tier, we're going to spend taxpayer dollars to try to protect our coastlines. That will be impossible because of our collective past decisions, myself included. It's a waste of time and money. I didn't fill in a card yet. I might. But on this topic, the Ag Reserve is on the precipice of being built out, with the remaining ag lands being developed for commercial or residential purposes at an alarming rate, with exchange for less preservation. The tier does not have an expiration that when reached, the remaining land is up for grabs to the highest bidder and most skilled lobbyist that can advocate for these changes. In 2015, that's not that long ago, the Board of County Commissioners considered recommendations for the addition of industrial uses above and beyond those grandfathered into the tier and found it to be detrimental to the tier, thereby specifically directing them that no new industrial future land use designations permitted in the Ag Reserve. In October 26th of 2021, the Ag Reserve workshop, and then in November, the board expressed support, and then in February 2nd, the board initiated these tax amendments. I want to just remind everybody that that board vote was 4-3, which was pretty close, and one of the commissioners at least said the only reason he was voting for it was to hear more about it. That doesn't sound like a resounding yes vote. And in conclusion, the reserve is at risk of phasing out agricultural lands in favor of high-density residential increased commercial, minuscule or elimination of preserve requirements and low industrial sectors. And we would mutate the environmentally sensitive lands in rural areas into an urbanized area indistinguishable from the rest of Palm Beach County. So I am asking you to please read the rest of Robert Hartzell's letter, and please deny the initiation of the Commerce Flu designation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Lauren McClellan, please come to the podium to my right. Roger Fina, please come to the podium to my left. After Ms. McClellan finishes her comments, Jennifer Morton, if you would not mind coming to the podium to my right, I'd appreciate it. And then after Mr. Roger Fina, Chris Capolini, please approach the podium to my left.
Hi, I'm Lauren McClellan. I think I came to the podium to my left, but that's okay.
That's okay. Roger, if you wouldn't mind going to the other one, that'll work.
So again, my name is Lauren McClellan with J. Morton Planning and Landscape Architecture. You guys are receiving a map that's going to be kind of the second part of my 3 minutes. I'm really happy to see the addition of Commerce to the comp plan. I think it's going to be a great designation. Specifically in the Ag Reserve, I think it's going to be such a benefit because without needed commercial, industrial, commerce type uses, then the Ag Reserve is just really sprawl where people have to drive into the Ag Reserve to get the needed things that they have, and that doesn't do anybody any good. So I think having more options for the residents will be good. So some of the language I just wanted to raise some concern with. The first point is the limitation to commerce for properties that are a minimum of 5 acres. So we represent a property owner right now that fronts on State Road 7. He actually abuts the Home Rich Nursery property. And he is just under 4 acres in size. And the reason really why he's less than 4 acres in size is because State Road 7, as we all know, has grown from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane, 6-lane divided highway in some places. So, and really Commerce would be a great idea for his property. He has, in the past, he had a landscape service guy on there. It was 100% landscape services, and then landscape service came under the microscope, and so his tenant actually left the property. But he is probably going to be back before, hopefully, with a Commerce request, as it makes sense for his small property. The second point that I want to bring is the location criteria. So on the map that you guys have, I have identified the property that's in. This is the West Atlantic Industrial. Specifically, I think the locations limiting to State Road 7, Atlantic, and Boynton are great. I just want to see about discussions west of State Road 7 for Atlantic Avenue. Like I said, this application is in process. He abuts the West Regional Park, and so you can see on this the uses that are in that West Delray Park. It's some intense uses. You know, there's lots of cars that come there on weekends. There are remote control airplanes, boats, helicopters. I was out there one weekend, and it was like a mini Apache helicopter out there. It was pretty loud. So just something else to kind of think about. And then some of the other uses, like on the second page, you can see around him to the south, you'll see that there's some existing landscape services with lots of vehicles and lots of trucks on the car. In the requirements for landscape services now, if they have a nursery and they're in conjunction with that, that landscape service is only limited to 1.5 acres. And Commerce allows a larger landscape service area, so they actually can put their trucks and accommodate everything on there. And then the other picture, really quick, sorry, is Amerigro, which you can see all the dust and dirt and piles of mulch associated with that property. So I just wanted to just summarize, to relook at the location and then the minimum size requirement. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Roger Fina, 10321 Atlantic Avenue, Delray Beach. So I lived out in what is the Ag Reserve for probably 30 years now. I built my house prior to the Ag Reserve being the Ag Reserve. When the Ag Reserve came to be, the project that I was a neighbor of basically got canceled. The development rights on all 400 acres around my house was moved over to what is the Meisner project today. Needless to say, I was pretty upset when that happened. I don't think any of you ever had your neighborhood canceled, but it's not exciting. I had some serious discussions with my district commissioner at that time, and what he told me was interesting. He said, you know, this is going to be getting a little emotional here, sorry. He said there was never going to be any vehicles, you know? There was never going to be any motorized vehicles. It didn't make things any better at that time, but over the years, it's become a racetrack out there. The neighbor across the street from my house is probably the heaviest industrial use in the ag reserve. I'm made to maybe pressure my roof maybe once a month. Okay, the noise that comes from the grinding and mulching. The bottom line is, I was left out of that first deal, and now looks like I'm going to get left out of another deal here because I'm west of 441. And I didn't buy into this ag reserve. I built my house prior to when it went into effect, and I think that something should be said towards that. All the uses that are out there today that surround my house do not support a residential house. And I would really appreciate you thinking about extending the New Commerce Industrial, whatever it is, west of 441 on Atlantic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning.
Mr. Chair?
Good morning.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I'd like to know exactly, Mr. Fina, is your property on this picture that Ms. McClellan gave us?
Yes, it is.
And which one are you referring to? What is it known as? Is it?
It's this. I mean, it's outlined in red there.
Okay, so it's west of 441. And what do you do on this property right now?
I live there.
And how many acres is it?
10 acres.
Okay, and you have no business or anything? It's just one home?
I did have a business at one time. We had a special exception.
I'm going to ask for a point of order. I think we discussed this. If this is what Commissioner Roth was referring to earlier, then I still think the appropriate time to even query this particular speaker would be after we've allowed all the other persons to make their public comments, as far as that goes. So, Commissioner Brown.
I'm used to getting canceled. It's okay.
No, it's not you being canceled. It's just we want to keep everything in order. But, Commissioner, this does sound like that unique situation that Commissioner Roth was referring to. You can definitely bring him back up later, but let's let the other public speakers have their say, and then we'll address your questions to him at the appropriate time. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Morton with J. Morton Planning and Landscape Architecture, and I think the board agrees that there is this need for the commerce land use category in the ag reserve. This need continues to increase as supply chain transitions to what we call last mile distribution, which means more local operations for goods and services. You have my letter in your packet, which further describes the supply chain needs. I have 2 points regarding my request for this board's support for option 2 as it relates to the preserve requirement specifically along 441. First, State Road 7 or 441 has historically, and it continues to be, the mode of transportation for agriculture, nurseries, and landscape services. Of all the properties along 441, there is only one property that is greater than 16 acres. It's the Mulvihill Nursery property, which is on the east side of State Road 7. This property is 38 acres. So if a preserve requirement for properties greater than 16 acres is approved, this site is the only one along 441 that is affected. Therefore, if a developer move forward with this parcel, assuming, let's round it up to 40 acres, he would only be able to develop 16 acres of the 40 acres. The rest of the land would be fallow because it is not realistic to assume that somebody will farm a 24-acre tract. Therefore, logic tells us that the developer or the contract purchaser will look for sites that are less than 16 acres and instead purchase multiple sites. This puts this one property owner at a significant disadvantage. Second, the 16-acre threshold is an arbitrary number. Many of you were here when the BCC allowed additional commercial low in the Ag Reserve. There were 3 applications in the system. The largest parcel was just under 16 acres. It was the Alderman Packing Plant at the northeast corner of Boynton and Lyons. It's now the Cobblestone Shopping Center. The BCC made a decision based on the applications that were in process at that time that anything greater than 16 acres would require a preserve, so that all 3 of those applications could be processed and approved without a preserve. So that 16-acre number is an arbitrary number. That's why we're requesting for the commerce category that the acreage number be increased to allow for the Mulvihill property to receive the commerce designation without the preservation requirement. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much. My name is Chris Capolini. I live in Boca Raton here. I'm a licensed civil engineer here in the state of Florida. I work for a national firm called Bowler. We do engineering throughout the East Coast of the United States. We're doing multiple projects as well as in the state of Florida. Can you hear me okay? Sorry.
Yes.
And right now we're seeing this pretty common throughout the country now. Jennifer mentioned the need for last mile facilities and how the supply chain has really changed as a result of COVID, and industrial specifically going more and more from a regional level to a local level. And specifically wanted to just to briefly mention the various types of industrial buildings that were shown by staff earlier and give some context to the typical sizes we've seen with those. Warehouse distribution was showing those typically fit on between 10 to 15 acres for a single building or multiple buildings. Cold storage, which definitely goes hand in hand with agricultural use. Those are typically in the range of 10 to 15 acres as well. When you get into some of the smaller industrial type facilities, flex space, showroom, or smaller bay, those generally range in the acreage of 5 to 10 acres. And as we're considering this threshold of 16 acres before that preserve comes, just for industrial buildings specifically, this is more of a horizontally driven type development. You can't just add a story to an industrial building, unlike other commerce uses. So the need to be able to have more area out here will be disproportionately affected for industrial uses. And a lot of that has to go into the various trucks that come out here and supply, how materials in the trucks circulate from a safety standpoint. So I'd like the board just to consider the 16 acres versus the 50 acres here. And again, this specifically only affects one piece of property. But also, when we zoom out of the Ag Reserve and where we want to be as a county in the future, the need for light industrial isn't going to be going away. And the ability to be able to cluster these developments in a more consolidated area definitely is a more sustainable approach from a community infrastructure standpoint, whether it's traffic, stormwater, water, sewer, all of that becomes much more sustainable on a larger site like we're discussing here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Joe. I apologize. I'm having trouble. I believe it says McElhenney. Please correct me, sir. Once you speak, you live at 9821 Happy Hollow Road in Delray Beach. Jim Knight, if you wouldn't mind coming to the podium to my left. After the first speaker completes his comments, Melissa McKeown, please come to the podium to my right. And then after Mr. Knight, Lois Sewell, if you would approach the podium to my left, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Joe Mulvihill, Mulvihill Nursery, Delray Beach, Florida. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. My family has been farming in the Ag Reserve, or West Delray, since 1976. The parcel that we're talking about is a parcel that we signed a contract on with the federal marshals back in 1992. and it took 3 years to close on the property. We've been there since '95. I'm actually the only person who owns these properties in the ag reserve, these larger pieces, around 50 acres, that actually still farms. You know, I've been doing it full-time for 41 years, and, you know, I'm kind of getting tired. It's been a tough road. You know, the last 20 years or so, my farm's been blown down twice, had to rebuild it. Across the street from my property, I have Piro packing facilities, which is really just like a distribution center that, you know, trucks come in and out on all the time. Just right north of my property, I have the transfer station. And actually, I have a copy of an appraisal. They wanted to buy the north piece of my property about 15 years ago, but I didn't sell because I really don't want to piss my neighbors off. And then directly across the street, I have FP&L, which is also a commercial building there. And oh my God, I'd much rather be at work today than stand up here in front of you guys. I'm not very good at it. But anyway, like yesterday, an old nurseryman friend of mine stopped by my farm, which I haven't seen in a while. They built a school on his property on south of Lyons Road, or south of Atlantic on Lyons Road. And I asked the guy, Dagmar knows who he is, it's Art Green. Art Green walked into my place. He's 93 years old, and he sold his property in 2013 at 84. And he said, you know, Joe, I'm 84 years old, and I got my $2.5 million, and I'm going to retire. I'll be 60 in a few months. I really don't want to wait till 92 or 83. Art told me both of his parents lived till over 100. My mom passed away unexpectedly at 47, and my dad had a horrible life with Parkinson's and died at 69, probably from spraying chemicals like I do quite a bit myself. So I hope you support my needs, and thank you for my time.
Thank you, sir. Please turn all phones to silent, please. Thank you. Mr. Knight. Morning.
Good morning, Chair, members of the council. Jim Knight, 740 Havana Drive, Boca Raton, Florida. I'm also a native of South Florida, born and raised here. I think there's time things change and requirements are out there. If you all recall, I think most everybody here remembers this study that was put out on sample landscape nurseries by Lisa Amara here, talking about all the violations that we had out in the Ag Reserve, Heritage Farms, and north of there. There are 27 companies out there on this particular notice that was put out there that are getting county of code violations today. It's Top Cut, Bermuda, Brightview, Extreme. There's a lot of mom and pop businesses there too. Pedro Terrazana, Duffy's, TRG Landscaping, which was just up at the Zoning Commission just the other day. A similar situation to Heritage Farms. They got a unanimous denial for zoning because they're doing landscape services somewhere where they don't want it. So he's got to find a new home to go to. And that just happened this past week. South River Nursery, Sports Turf, Tree Movers, Viking Utility, Viking Growers, Nanax. These are probably companies that you see in your neighborhood taking care of your landscaping. Vanderbilt, New Leaf, Carlisle, Tree Movers again, U.S. Garden Services, Maxim Services, Dobson Clifford, Twin States Marketing, Master Gardeners, Blue Jay, Avery Farms, Treasure Coast Landscape, Evergreen, and it goes on. And these are companies that are being forced out of neighborhoods and so forth. I understand it. Well, the right place is to put them out on the major thoroughfares, off of 441, off of Atlantic, Boynton Beach Boulevard. There's something else that's going on in this industry right now, and that is that there is a consolidation. The private equity firms are purchasing these companies and bundling them together. It used to be they only needed 2 or 3 acres for the landscape services. Well, now that's growing, and that's why the need for having this larger footprint, not just at 16 acres, but allow a number of them to come into one location, which makes sense with a major thoroughfare. I think it's very important to remember that gas prices are continuing to go up. That's, it may be just because of the war right now, but they're not going down. And if, I don't know if we have time to put the map up, I guess we don't, but if you looked at those yellow rings on the map that Lisa had there, all of that, majority of all that industrial was at the very north end of the county. And please keep in mind that we're dealing with a very small percentage left of the Ag Reserve because the majority of the Ag Reserve has already been preserved. You can see the yellow rings there and where they're located.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
thank
Knight.
you for your time and consideration this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I'm Melissa McEwen. This is Luca Santoro. We're here to speak on the topic 9481. Oh, no. Sorry, that's my old address. I'm used to speaking about that address, but luckily it's no longer at that property. 18359 181st Circle South, Boca. I wanted to just come out here today and support option 2. We heard from my Uncle Joey here with the parcel off of 441. Staff, thank Lisa for that great presentation on commerce and how it's needed in this area. And I just feel that, my uncle's property along 441 is well suited for this, to fit this need that's out there. I was surprised by the map to see everything just so far north when this commerce, it's not even industrial, it's a commerce category that we're creating that helps support the community. This is part of the evolution of this area in the Ag Reserve. We have a lot of homes out there to serve. We have a lot of people, and we're looking at multifamily soon, which is more homes and people. We need that, but we also need this commerce category to support that community. And just going with the acres of 16 versus 50, like Lisa said, it's a policy decision. And with commerce, we know it's single stories. We heard a speaker talk about how commerce is different from commercial. You can't go up, you need space. So selecting a new preserve requirement makes sense for this new land use. So I don't think carrying something over that we fictitiously or, that we made for commercial is necessarily the right plan for this. Planning-wise, we should look at what's there. And also, making it 50 acres doesn't open like Pandora's box. If we actually look at how many properties qualify, there's one or two or a handful. I know we have the exact number, but it's no more than 4. And some of those properties are looking at multifamily, so really you're only looking at Mulvihill and maybe one other property that really this impacts with this 50-acre preserve requirement. So I just want you all to know that, and I know you all take the job very seriously. You all do a great job, and discuss it and see if that's something that you can support, and we really hope that you will. And I also wanted to talk on Fina. He's also someone that's been there a very long time, way before this Ag Reserve, and we support him as well. He's on Atlantic Ave. I think that's a pretty key point. He is west of 441, but given his location, I think he should be considered as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Mahendra Madem to the podium. Please step to the podium to my right. Joseph O'Donnell, if you wouldn't mind stepping to the podium to my left after the next speaker. I apologize. Sorry about that, ma'am.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. My name's Lois Sewell, 9437 State Road 7. I am in support of the new designation that staff has come up with for commercial or industrial. I also support option 2 with the preserve requirements for parcels in excess of 50 acres. I definitely think we'd be losing a lot of good usable space if you guys consider it on smaller than that. Other than that, I don't think we can stop people from coming to Florida, and we have a lot of services that we need to render to those new people. And the properties that are up for review right now are definitely I think that they're great properties for all these future people moving to the area, and the ones that are here right now. I know you hear this from everybody, but thank you very much for listening. I appreciate everything that you do, and I am in support of staff's recommendations and the preserve requirements in excess of 50 acres. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Chair and esteemed panel, thank you for allowing me to speak today. 7 a.m. Farms, that's the farm I actually co-own with Rajesh. We have about 118 acres in Ag Reserve, and with a dream, to make it work for producing vegetables and greens to serve the local community in the eastern part of the country. That's the dream, right? All of us want to actually dream and make those things happen. Believe it or not, it's not that easy. I know sitting up here, we can talk about it, we can say passionately that we all support agriculture, local, and don't understand what a farmer has to go through. And I can speak a little bit about that. Labor availability, labor cost. I pay more than, proudly I can say that, more than what Walmart pays. We keep hearing about Walmart again and again. I'm sorry, but I pay more than that. Labor availability is a problem. We don't have labor. I mean, we are all talking about agriculture, agriculture, agriculture. Yes. Do we have enough labor? Do we have housing for this labor? Nothing is allowed here, and you still want to have this ag reserve, be preserved. I like it. I mean, personally, I only want to do organic. But is that even feasible, sustainable? No one is talking about it. No one is feeling the pain of all these farmers out here, right? And accessibility to the market. Am I allowed to sell on the farm? No. Right? All these things need to be considered. I mean, I know many folks who are passionate about having agriculture here speak about it, wants the agriculture to be here. But being a farmer for the past 6 years, I've seen it's not that easy, and it's not sustainable. Luckily, I do multiple things, and I'm able to support with that. I can't even pay just the interest on what I actually owe on this property. So, and there are several other things, allowing commercial. I mean, I support the land use change to being commerce, and allowing light industrial usage that's possible. And again, giving an opportunity for us to actually survive. Like, even if I'm doing agriculture, I would like to do it, but is it even sustainable? So I thank everyone, patiently listening to me here, and I would like the board to consider commerce as an option. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Joseph O'Donnell, are you present? Good morning.
Morning. Apparently, I don't take direction very well. My name's Joe O'Donnell. We own a 60-acre horse farm in the Ag Reserve, and I'm here representing SARA, Save the Ag Reserve for Agriculture. It's a 13-member group of farmers and ag businesses within the Ag Reserve. If one of the goals of the CMR, which I support, let me back up a minute. I support the concept, Sarah supports the concept, there needs to be structure to what the Board of County Commissioners is continually being asked to approve. So no problem there. However, if the goal is to, one of the goals is to protect agriculture, which I presume it would be, some of the language needs to be tightened up. Because I've observed over the 12 years of working intimately with development in the Ag Reserve that language is key to what ends up being built and not built. First of all, 60-40. I totally support the 16 acres. 50 acres is too large. That would mean you could, for example, a recent proposal of a 1 million square foot distribution center generating a couple thousand truck trips a day could have been done if we cut it off at 16 acres, because that was 50 acres. So build on 49 and don't sell the other acre. So that's not what we're trying to accomplish, I believe, in reading this. The CMR designation is intended to protect existing residents. Now remember, I'm here speaking for businesses, agriculture businesses in the Ag Reserve. I believe the language should also include existing agriculture businesses. Again, the key is in the language. Smaller light industrial. It should not include distribution centers. There was a recent proposal in the Ag Reserve for a 1 million square foot distribution center that generated nearly 2,000 trailer truck trips a day. That would have fallen under light industrial as it's currently defined. So, light industrial should not include distribution, in our opinion. It would be interesting to think about adding things like nursing homes, churches, and low-density townhouses, non-obtrusive developments, as best as possible. So, our recommendation, change the definitions. Frontage. There's 3 avenues that are recommended. I don't really have a problem with that, except the frontage definition needs to be refined. It does not include access. So that means you could have a large development on a key boulevard, one of the 3, with no access on or off that boulevard except through an artillery small road. Excuse me. It worked when I said it in the mirror.
Thank you, sir.
That's really important, I believe. Thank you. Oh, and I would like to say a really good job has been done by staff on this report. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Next up, George Soria. Please approach the podium to my right. Sheila Calderon, please approach the podium to my left. And then after Mr. Soria finishes his comments, Heidi Mahaffey, you can approach the podium to my right. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm just logged out real quick. Okay. All right. I thank you for having us here this meeting. And I'm here basically, my name is George Soria, and I'm from the Florida Permaculture Resource Center here in the West Palm area. And we are an education facility. We're a nonprofit. And one of the important things that we try to teach is we're looking at the future and the present situation. I respect the work that the county has done. I respect the summary. But one of the things that I do have in question, and I've been listening very attentively, is that there's no, February 27th, the UN gave a report. And that report was very severe. And one of the speakers mentioned it in one of the comments. And we, as a county and as individuals, have to be responsible. We have to, if we're going to look forward and we're looking at the future, we have to look at the future generations of our children, and we have to look at the future generation also of what's happening in the world globally, as well as how it affects us on a local basis. Because this is talking about human life. And if we don't pay attention, if recommendations are given on a national, global basis, and they're putting it, they actually do a summary for policymakers worldwide. So policies to give recommendations, and we're not reading it or even taking it into consideration, we're failing our own society. We have to take into consideration what is written presently and what's happening in the future, because our children and their children depend on it. It's not about us anymore. It's about our future. And one of the things they also show in these reports, and it hits every aspect from city to forestry to farming, it touches everything in this report and gives recommendations and options. And we are failing if we do not take that into consideration. We have to. And one of the things that happens is biodiversity. We keep destroying trees. I understand if the land is open and you want to build something on it, okay, it's open land, fine. But what about the trees?
The solution in this report, if you read it, is that the forestry is the most important thing to save our future. The trees are the most important things in our society, and yet we fail to consider it, even though it's recommended by the UN and recommended by most of the scientists here in the world. We cannot do this. We have to teach our children. Farmer mentioned that he needs help. Our children don't know anything about farming. I asked a 6-year-old, where does an apple come from, or where does the tomato come from? He says the supermarket. Does that mean we failed as a society, that our own children think that fruit and vegetables come from the supermarket? We have to do better. And I'm only here to ask you to please consider the latest information before you make any decision. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. Sheila Calderon. First, I apologize for my phone. I usually am very good about turning it off, and I screwed up. I'm from Green Acres, and I want to refer back to what the citizens voted for in '99 to preserve the Ag Reserve for agriculture and preservation. Slowly, we have been permitting more and more development. It's got to reach a maximum at some point. Otherwise, we are going to lose our agricultural reserve. It cannot sustain if we have continuous development there. We are affecting not only the Ag Reserve, but the roads, traffic, the need for more services, including schools, fire and police services, etc. This is all a tax burden, of course, on all of us. I feel strongly we should only be permitting what was originally designated, the 60% preserve, 40% development. Protecting the Ag Reserve does not require we modify the comprehensive plan to accommodate more residential and commercial. The founding principles of the Ag Reserve and the associated bond to secure the preservation lands require just an unwavering dedication to the purpose and intent of this fantastic, unique tier that we have, and we just have been slowly eating away at it. It's the duty of each of us as public servants to consider these comments, especially you guys up there, because you're going to make the decisions on this, and fully evaluate the repercussions of modifying the plan, the comprehensive plan, before taking any actions that could be detrimental to the very core of this agricultural tier. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. Heidi Mahaffey on behalf of 1,000 Friends of Florida and Loxahatchee Sierra Club. I've submitted a letter for your consideration, and I'd like to take this time to talk about some of the points that the county made that are addressed in the letter and we can further expound upon. County presented that most industrial light permits are by right. This would take out of consideration where those industrial uses are put, and then we can't look at the considerations in the environmental lands and impact, the water resources and buffer. Rather, it would just be a carte blanche check off of whether or not certain things had taken place, frontage, acreage, and the such. The agricultural reserve is so unique, and it was meant to be that way, not just for the residents of the ag reserve, but for the county as a whole. There are so many environmental benefits and water resources benefits, and even things that are impacting climate change that need to be focused on by this county, so that we're not giving away what the resources are in the ag reserve to preserve it as a benefit for all of Palm Beach County. Another issue is the request to continue even more west than State Road 7. County discussed that had been a request by interested parties, but there was no discussion as to the detriment of including additional development west of State Road 7. And if this is going to be a policy implementation, we need to look at what the comprehensive plan already says in Objective 1.5. And to cite, Objective 1.5 has clearly stated that environmental and water resources have been best preserved where development, and I quote, concentrated east of State Road 7 in order to protect the environmentally sensitive lands within and surrounding the Loxahatchee National Wildlife Refuge, end quote, as well as ensure that growth is clustered appropriately where infrastructure and services already exist in order to, quote, reduce costs and impacts on taxpayers. And also, new development should be occurring as planned development with a preserve area. There's been discussion about regional versus local. And again, this was deemed a policy decision, but Objective 1.5 speaks very clearly on this. Whatever is occurring in the agricultural reserve is meant to support the residents and community there, not on a regional basis. And to open this up to a regional type of industrial use is just antithesis to what the ag reserve is meant to preserve. Another statement was that there's no math on the 16 versus 50 preserve, and that would again be a policy decision. But again, let's look at what the Objective 1.5 does for the ag reserve. It requires the preservation, and that is cited as defined as in perpetuity of not only agricultural lands but open spaces and water resources. Please consider what you're going to do, and we recommend that you deny these motions, or at least that we deny the ag reserve motion from moving forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have 9 public comment cards from persons who do not wish to speak but would like to have their comments read into the record, so I will quickly move through them. The first speaker is Gary Morris, 14470 Smith Sunday Road. He supports Agenda Item 3A1. I am in support of Option 2 and proposals for new commerce in the Agricultural Reserve. Laurie Maybe, 4849 Brighton Lakes Boulevard out of Boynton, supports 3A1. I support Option 2. I don't think they should restrict smaller parcels. Parenthetically, she wrote under 50 acres. Patrick Rosacker, 12440 U.S. Highway 441, South State Road 7 in Boynton, supports 3A1. I support Option 2. I support the new commerce proposals for the Ag Reserve. Smaller parcels under 50 acres should not be constrained with pressure areas that could be detrimental to development. Scott Bowling, 9717 Happy Hollow Road in Delray. Did not note whether he was supporting or opposing this issue. I'm in for supporting Option 2. We need new commerce land for smaller parcels under 50 acres. There's no need for additional ag reserve. We gave that up when GL started building. I'm sorry, Mr. Bowling, I'm having trouble reading that last word, but in any event, he supports Option 2. Jeff McDougall, 14068 Smith Sunday Road in Delray, supports 3A1. I support Option 2. I support the new commerce proposals for the Ag Reserve. Smaller parcels under 50 acres should not be constrained with pressure areas that could be detrimental to development. Suan Yaki or Yoki supports 3A1, 9278 Heath Ridge Drive out of West Palm Beach. I support Option 2 to not have preserve area on the new classification of commerce on parcels under 50 acres. Patrick J. Ford, 8400 96th Court, South out of Boynton Beach, supports 3A1 as well. I support Option 2, smaller pieces of properties less than or equal to 50 acres to be excluded from the 60/40 rule. We especially need industrial area here. I have worked in Ag Reserve since 1980 and have lived there since 1995. Steve Homrich, 690 Northeast 15th Place in Boynton Beach, supports 3A1. I support Option 2. The small businesses that service residents in the Ag Reserve would benefit with this new commerce proposal. The preserve requirement should be eliminated on parcels less than 50 acres and replaced with a large perimeter native landscape buffer like the one that surrounds the transfer station. And last, Suzanne Mulvihill, 9821 Happy Hollow Road out of Delray, supports 3A1. Please vote in favor of Option 2. Preserve requirements on parcels over 50 acres. On February 2nd, the Board of County Commissioners asked staff to include adding the option of preserve requirements on land use change applications over 50 acres. After hearing experts and the public request this option and speak to the need for it, I kindly ask for your support of Option 2. All right. At this time, Commissioners, do we have any questions for staff? And then after that, we'll call Mr. Fina back up so that Commissioner Bras can complete her questions to him.
I have a question for another one of the witnesses, Mr. Chair, as well.
All right, so let's make a note of that. But for first things up, do we have any questions for staff?
Yeah, I have questions.
Commissioner Vinegar, for staff?
Sure.
Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Sure. Just about the corridor, I didn't see a map showing where you want this in the agricultural reserve. Is it how far north and south on 441? It seemed to me that you were speaking just at the corner of 441 and the major two corridors, not north and south. Because is that true or what?
The packet that we prepared would allow, would direct locations for the commerce, flu, or industrial, because we would recommend that new industrial in the tier be this new flu. It would be along Boynton Beach Boulevard, State Road 7, and Atlantic, terminating on Boynton Beach Road, Boynton Beach at State Road 7, so we wouldn't have any more west. And as some of the speakers brought up, they would like to extend further west along this segment. And then what Mr. O'Donnell brought up, which was a good point, we wrote the language for frontage. We didn't address frontage and access. And what happens a lot in the zoning division, now that I'm over there, is there's properties that come forward and they are fronting a roadway. However, because of access restrictions, they can't get access to that roadway because there's language in Article 11, land development regulations and subdivision regulations that require parcels, whenever possible, to use the secondary roadway. And so, for example, I'm just going to pick a random property that's not in question right now. For example, we're not, I don't know, just let me get here. Here, this commercial property, it already has commercial, but let's say that didn't have commercial. Well, it's at an intersection. It's not a particularly good one, but I don't know. Sometimes there's instances, and where Mr. O'Donnell lives, I'll just talk about the road that he's talking about. This property here, this property that has come before the board requesting industrial in the past, this segment along Atlantic wouldn't meet the regulations to get access directly on Atlantic. So as we saw the last time this property came forward, the subdivision regulations required access onto Starkey Road, which is not an arterial. And so the things that are for discussion today, staff recommended the properties fronting State Road 7 and Atlantic and Boynton from the Turnpike to State Road 7. We have requests to extend that west for properties like West Atlantic, the FINA property, with these rules. And then we also have another request as requiring access and frontage directly on these roads and to not allow them to access the secondary roads. I don't know if that helps, but
I understand that.
The staff recommendation versus what some of the people have suggested today.
North and south.
Yes.
On State Road 7.
Yes.
From Clintmore Road up.
Yes.
Is that
we
part of this or not?
that we've the only two industrial amendments, well, three that the board has approved are all fronting State Road 7. So yes, we proposed. This is Sunflower there. That board approved industrial on that property. This is the Homeridge property. The board approved that. That's also on State Road 7. And Las Farmas, the board transmitted that, and that's up for adoption on State Road 7. So yes, we were proposing the State Road 7 corridor, the entire extent of the Ag Reserve. Property owners be allowed to ask for, which they already can ask for industrial. We're proposing to allow them to ask for commerce.
East and west side?
Yes, we didn't distinguish east and west side different. And again, the ones that the board has approved so far, all three are on State Road 7 and they're all on the west side.
Okay, because a majority of that is becoming residential, so that doesn't make sense. But thank you for that answer. And my other question is about the sustainability principles. And that was a main issue here on your page 8 with that number 2 and number 6 of the sustainability principles, that it supports that. It supports the sustainability for economic development, but there are 7 principles, and this proposed amendment, at least for number 2, the second part, the agricultural reserve, it appears to be in contradiction to principles 1, 3, 5, and 7. So is there some reason why each one wasn't explained? Because it appears that it's against the sustainability principles of 1, 3, 5, and 7.
This report doesn't place judgment on industrial land use designations that are already allowed to be processed by the board. Already today, property owners could come in and ask for industrial in the ag reserve. This report wasn't judging those properties. This report was proposing and focusing on narrowing the ability and the design and the uses and the preserve requirements for what's already occurring today. So the reason that we focused exclusively on creating the new FLU and narrowing those channels is because that's what the amendment proposes. Already today, you can ask for industrial. Mr. Fina's property is in play right now because there is no policy. This is for example, Sunflower came in and this one came in. We didn't write a report on industrial as a whole because they could already apply. We focused our analysis on the narrowing concept of the new FLU, the location criteria, and the commerce, and that's why those areas of the report weren't criticized. We also weren't looking at site-specific amendments. Each one that comes forward is going to have impacts on compatibility and traffic and all of that. We don't have a site-specific application today, so we're not looking at sustainability with any kind of quantity of impacts of any individual property. So that's why that wasn't addressed in that manner.
Okay, and my one last third question and last question is right now the county is discussing increased density in the agricultural reserve, and smaller PUDs are being considered. And there even one was transmitted, and it would be a smaller PUD. And my question is, why isn't this, it would appear that this part 2 here that we're dealing with on the agricultural reserve would be more of a discussion holistically with that, with the density issue, because these smaller parcels the owners may opt to have, may very likely sell for residential, possibly, but saying now, just narrowing it down to only commerce along, say, State Road 7, when we're discussing density, increased density of homes and units.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Why isn't this being discussed with that, so we have great planning between our residential and our industrial?
That's a good point. We went to the Board of County Commissioners, in October 27th and in early November, and we had individual direction for residential and the industrial component, and staff chose to address that sandwich one bite at a time. And so that we brought forward the industrial first, and then there's another item that's going to come back on the residential, but theoretically the two could be looked at together. It's just the way the dialogues shook out, but that's a good point.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, we'll have Commissioner Stopik, then Commissioner Roth, then Commissioner Bras.
Thank you, sir. Lisa, hi. Just a quick question. I understand the whole north-south thing, State Road 7. We get it. It's a big road. It's a huge road. And as the case with most of Florida, going north and south is not so bad. Going east and west is a freaking nightmare, as we all know. So the real question in my mind is what's going to happen with Atlantic? Boynton's a little better, but not much. But Atlantic, I had the misfortune of being on that road at 5 o'clock, a couple of Fridays ago, heading west out to Wellington, and it took almost 30 minutes to get from Atlantic and jog to Atlantic and 441. So I just don't see how any of this works if Atlantic isn't widened substantially, which of course will create a complete nightmare from both a zoning and emotional standpoint, because you can only have so much access off of State Road 7. Ultimately, these trucks, or whatever you have, whether it's trucks, people, bicycles, anything, they're going to want to come east to the turnpike via either Boynton or Atlantic. Or keep on going to get to 95. So I just don't see how this works unless there's greater consideration given to east-west transit, as well as what Mr. O'Donnell was touching on, which I appreciated, the ancillary roads.
Again, that's an excellent point. What's unique about the Ag Reserve is the turnpike seems to act as a barrier. If anyone lives east of I-95 like I do, the train tracks in I-95, I use this analogy a lot, are a barrier. And if the train, that long FEC train stops, which sometimes happen, you can't get on the other side of the road. And what happens in the Ag Reserve is between Clintmore and I think Hypoluxo, the only breaks at the turnpike are Boynton Beach Boulevard and Atlantic, and then it's planned for Flavor Pick to go forward at one point. But that is, a excellent point that as development or these site-specific amendments, and again, this is not a site-specific amendment today, but as these individual property owners come forward with their requests, the cumulative impacts of adding more density or trips or traffic is channeling through Boynton Beach Boulevard and channeling through Atlantic for the most part. And that's an excellent point. And again, staff didn't broach this as part of this because we're inventing a new blue and starting the dialogue on types of industrial and locations. But that's a very excellent point.
Just to follow up then, there's no immediate plans or foreseeable plans for widening of Atlantic to a substantial ability to handle or even remotely handle.
So there is, and this project has been spoken about many times at the county's Transportation Planning Agency, which is the MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization for the county. And their role is to prioritize the federal transportation funds that the county receives. There's been a push to expedite the widening of Atlantic multiple times. It is funded in the 5-year Transportation Improvement Program for construction. They've broken it out by 2 segments, from State Road 7 to Lyons, and then Lyons to, I forget the east.
Jog.
Yes, thank you. And those are both funded for construction. I believe one is in fiscal year 24, and the other segment's further out in the 5-year TIP. So it's not immediate, but it is in the 5-year funding program.
One quick follow-up to that you brought. Thank you, sir. So, and when we say obviously funded, when we say funded, we're talking about funding for construction costs as well as funding for land acquisition costs.
That is a great point, because for this fiscal year, there's been funding for PD&E studies, for right-of-way acquisition, design. The actual construction dollar funding that I referenced is also included within the 5-year TIP. Okay. So not just the preliminary steps, but also the actual.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Roth. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Not quite sure where to begin. I have the great advantage of watching people's expressions sitting up here. So there are a number of things that people said that I saw staff expressions that led me to believe that, gee, maybe we might consider something or incorporate it or add a few sentences. I've been known in the past, if you look at that chart again of 2016 going forward, I've been blasted by some people for approving some site-specific light industrial uses in the Ag Reserve. Other people have thanked me, but I have had the opportunity to make that judgment project by project. I fear that allowing this to go through now the way it is, and some of you have been on the commission longer than I, or just about as long as I, and some have not, but we have accepted some of those site-specific light industrial uses where we as a planning commission determined that it served, I'm going to say, a greater good. Either it reduced traffic rather than giving us more residential density, or it fulfilled a need that we were hearing that local residents needed. My fear with this proposal, as it sits now, and I will not be able to vote for it as a whole. I would need some changes to this. My fear is that we will be suggesting a by right acceptance of some of these proposals, taking away our judgment.
Commissioner Roth, forgive me for interrupting you, but do you have a question for staff at this point in
Yeah,
time?
well, it's only for a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Only for
So
questions
my
at this
question
point.
is
No motion on the
to
floor.
Mr. Thank you. To Mr. O'Donnell's very good points about tightening up language, no distribution centers. I think, Lisa, you've already addressed some of the frontage and access issues. Can you rework this in such a way to tighten up language and to remove some of the light industrial issues and to protect us from by right? I guess that's in a question.
Well, as far as the access question, theoretically, we could add a sentence in this that says these sites have to have frontage and access on these roads, which will limit the sites that could come forward to request this use. I mean, that's words that would fit along that. As far as the by right discussion from Heidi with Robert Hertzfeld's office, that is, the by right is exactly why we're proposing a new land use designation, because as the properties come forward, Sunflower and Las Farmas, I think that's how you say it, and the West Fina site, if they come in and get IL zoning, there's a chart in your packet that has, starting on page E7, they would come in and be able to do permitted uses. And our proposal is to require a site plan and DRO approval for almost every use allowed in commerce. So if you have a P for permitted in the table in the matrix in the code, you can just go straight to building permit and you can go have that use. You have if it's a certain size, you have to go through a site plan approval process. But otherwise, you go straight to building permit. And one of the things with the commerce flu, for inside the urban suburban tier or outside the urban suburban tier, we would tighten up the matrix to require almost everything to have a DRO approval. So that way there's buffering, setbacks, and maybe have some of the uses that would be a P for permitted be Class A, which requires Board of County Commissioner approval. So the permitting argument from Heidi, I'm not sure I'm understanding, because anything we're talking about today, to have a commerce flu, or if we don't approve this and we just stick with the industrial flu, all of those sites have to come through a future land use amendment process, have to be presented to this board and the Board of County Commissioners. The difference is what we're proposing is that we could set the rules so you know when it comes in that certain uses are not allowed, versus the way we did Sunflower, which is with the applicant saying we're going to prohibit these uses and we're going to allow these uses on a custom basis. So that's the two questions. And was there a third question? I'm sorry.
Well, you've addressed by right, and you've addressed the frontage. Well, I think the types of uses, warehouse, distribution centers, would staff consider eliminating some of those as acceptable?
Well, based upon the letter from Cobra that we received this morning or last night, it looks like they are going to have very strong opinions on what kind of uses are suitable in the ag reserve. Like, for example, self-storage. Typically, inside the urban suburban tier, self-storage we would consider a light industrial use, and we wouldn't have a problem with it. But if this is, we're looking at custom language for the ag reserve, the Board of County Commissioners meeting is not until the first week of May. There's opportunity, today for us to collect feedback from the Planning Commission on suitable and unsuitable uses, but we can't really go through like the whole 50 uses. But certainly we can continue dialogue or collect comments through when we publish the packet for the board and have an attachment. We were thinking we would really, if the board transmitted this item in May, we would have the matching code language for the adoption hearing. So then there's no That was one of the things the Sunflower applicant brought up. They thought it was very nebulous and gray, not having the specific uses. So we thought with this one, we would come back and tighten that up for the adoption hearing. So I guess the answer to the question is, for sure, any uses are for the ag reserve are up for discussion on which is light and which is heavy and which is appropriate and which is not.
So, well, this board would still have the opportunity to make an assessment.
The only way that could come back is if if the board postponed this item and sent us back to the drawing board. If the Board of County Commissioners said, you know what, we're not going to do this right now. Go back, come back later with more specifics. Because today, I don't think in the context of today, we could go through all of these uses, and we didn't prepare that yet as part of the.
No, understood, absolutely, but it's exactly. Again, I think it was Mr. O'Donnell who said that sometimes it's language that gets us into trouble. I think we need to tighten some of this up. Again, with history, where I have voted to recommend approval for some site-specific. I just think we need a little bit of tightening, recognizing you've done an amazing job. Thank you.
Commissioner Bras.
First of all, I really was hoping that staff was going to give us a map showing what properties could fit into this light industrial area. And I'm talking about individual properties. We have, it used to be Boynton Botanicals. It's on Boynton Beach Boulevard and 441 and right now. And the gentleman he's tired. He gave up. He didn't want to do it anymore. But in order to hold on to his property, anticipating the fact that we were going to be writing out a check for a much more intense use than what his nursery is, he is leasing it to another nursery person who is really being quite successful. So I really wish, this is a lot more intense than just Atlantic Avenue and Boynton Beach Boulevard. Boynton Beach Boulevard doesn't have a lot. We have the two pieces on the Turnpike just west, Boynton Beach Boulevard just west of the Turnpike, and those are concerns, but we are working through the process. My problem is, how can I would rather take site-by-site application, debate it, and vote it up or down instead of just giving this broad sweep of the brush and say, if you haven't sold out for preservation yet, and you don't have a commercial designation, and you don't have a residential designation, you can go forward with light industrial. And this makes me really nervous because it's like with Mr. Fina. There is no reason Mr. Fina can't sell his property rights on his 10 acres to Mr. Mulvihill.
Commissioner Bras, you have a question for staff?
Am I wasting my time coming here?
No, we can have this debate when the motion is on the floor. We haven't even gotten to the motion yet. Do you have a question for staff?
I'm done.
Okay.
And I only spoke for 1 minute and 46 seconds. Thank you.
Well, we don't have a motion on the floor. Now, Commissioner Bras, you did ask to speak with Mr. Fina. Would you like him to come back to the podium?
I believe Mr. Fina has left.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Groman, you said you would like to speak with one of the speakers as well?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I appreciate.
Is Mr. Fina still here?
Yeah.
Would you please come up to the... So, Mr. Fina, what do you use your 10 acres for right now? You live there. You have no business, you have no nursery, you don't do anything on the property except for you have one house on 10 acres. And all of the property surrounding you is basically, it was hash through. Does that mean that is designated county property as far as a park, or what, Ms. Amara?
Easement.
Okay, so all the way surrounding around you is a conservation easement, but you want to put industrial on your little 10 acres right there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fina. Commissioner Gorman?
Mr. Chair, I do appreciate your attempt at streamlining this, but the problem is that although Ms. Ross's witness didn't leave, my proposed witness did leave. It was a gentleman from Bowler, from the civil engineer, and I really wanted to ask him some questions about which related to the 16 acres versus 15 acres and distribution centers and how that work, and what's the current modality of what we need in that regard? Is it 100? Are these things viable as 100,000 square feet or whatnot? So that was the purpose of my question, but unfortunately
That's
he's
fine.
left.
I mean, generally speaking, we don't question people during public comment. We either question the applicant or staff. So, no. I mean, I'm sorry that he wasn't here. Moving forward.
Well, yeah, I've been on many boards before, and Robert's Rules of Order would permit you to ask questions of witnesses since they are testifying.
Right.
So,
well, I don't see that as testifying. As no need to belabor that point. My position is we'll ask questions of the applicant and staff. moving forward.
But I do have questions for staff.
Sure.
Can I proceed?
Well, I asked that earlier. I thought, yeah, of course.
Oh no,
you have a
I didn't know
follow-up
what
question?
order you were taking people.
We asked the questions of staff, and then once the board said that we had no additional questions, then I turned to the questions that you all had for the public commenters.
Oh, okay. So I have a question for staff.
Go ahead.
So Lisa, I'm a little confused about the west of State Road 7, 441, and the fact. So Atlantic Avenue and Boynton Beach Boulevard are arterial roadways.
Well, they are on the thoroughfare map. We have a map 14.1 in the comp plan that has them as arterial roadways from State Road 7 east. And we also have a federal functional classification map, which I don't remember the number of, but they are on that map from State Road 7 east. And our commercial policies in the plan are directed towards those adopted maps. But for practical purposes, whether or not it's an arterial roadway, I think depends on who you're asking. But are they pretty wide? Absolutely. And are they dead ends? Absolutely too. So we stuck with our commercial policies, but again, as we brought up, it could be a policy decision by recommendation by this board and decision to allow those parcels west of State Road 7 fronting that to meet the arterial requirements.
So you've just directly answered my question as the rationale for what that you're using. But wouldn't these still be arterial roadways down the road on a future map? And then again, you also mentioned the fact that there were industrial properties that have been approved on the west side of State Road 7. And I was kind of leaning to the fact, absent your excellent explanation as to why you did what you did, is, I mean, wouldn't that be sort of unfair to have an arterial road on one side of the street and it's the same road on the other side of the street and sort of exempt those properties from being considered industrial under your new FLU simply because they were west of State Road 7? Presumably these roads also are stubbed out with utilities and electric and water and all that stuff because the gentleman who lives out there wouldn't be able to drink water. So that's my question. Could that be a potential problem down the road where you're sort of treating people differently, or is the staff or perhaps the commission open to saying, well, we might as well include these roads west of 441 because eventually they'll be improved. In addition to that, the gentleman who spoke about access, that was a really excellent point. They got to be on an arterial roadway, but they should have at least one access point off the arterial roadway. That's what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah. So to address your
statement, that's kind of a question.
Yeah. So to address your question on the roadway classification, I don't have the definition or exact threshold in front of me, but typically, there's arterial, there's collector, local roadways. Arterial is kind of the biggest, most volume-heavy facilities. West of State Road 7, because of Loxahatchee, and those roadways aren't going to be extended, so they'll never be widened or have those volumes that would trigger that threshold to being under a collector or an arterial threshold.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Commissioners Van and Commissioners Royal, do you have any questions for staff? I apologize for skipping you earlier.
No, not at this time.
Okay. All right.
May I have one more quick question?
Sure.
10 words.
No.
The Mulva Hill property They don't want to do preservation. But if they had to do preservation, would they be able to purchase the FINA property as their preservation area and find other parcels in the ag reserve, purchase them, and that would be, he does not have to take part of his 38 acres and make that preservation. He can do off-site preservation. Is that correct?
With regards to purchasing, we can't speak to who can purchase what, but as far as doing off-site preserve, yes, most of the commercial developments that have come forward or residential development that have done 60% preserve have done off-site preserve.
And my last question is, are we allowed to recommend maybe it not being 60-40, maybe be 40-60, or so there's at least preservation, but it's not as intense as it would be for the residential? Are we allowed to recommend something like that? Maybe the 60-40 is too intense. I'd rather have something less intense than none.
Text amendment to the board, and this is a advisory body. With a text amendment, there's no site-specific application. I don't know that there's a confine to your recommendation. I'm looking at Kevin.
Yeah, right. You can include in your recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners a different, again, we were trying to be consistent with the commercial. That's why we're recommending the 16 as the threshold for preserved parcels, the 60-40, but you are certainly, as a advisory board, welcome to make that recommendation and can be brought forward.
Commissioner Pompey and Commissioner Larson, do either of you have questions for staff?
No.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Thank you very much. Question for you. There's a property at the corner of Boynton Beach Boulevard and State Road 7 owned by an agricultural firm currently using it as storage and distribution as well as agricultural equipment storage. It's less than 5 acres. Have you considered that that would actually pigeonhole that particular property owner's ability to use if we were to move forward with this FLUA amendment? They have actively continued agricultural farming. As a matter of fact, they were actually going through and successfully passed a pesticide safety inspection this morning that I couldn't be at. So I would like to understand, you had said 5 acres because it was part of a outlying kind of definition. I want to get more perspective about that because as we're considering, so very well put by Mr. O'Donnell, which I do want to actually ask a clarification question for him. So if you would approach the podium. Can you give me more information, Lisa, about the 5 acres and exactly why? Because that property is east of State Road 7 and they're actively farming and it's actually considered agricultural use right now.
We didn't do a parcel by parcel analysis of every properties in the tier. However, we felt that a minimum acreage of some figure was important. We've seen over the years, little half-acre pieces try to come through the process, and we felt a minimum was necessary. We chose 5 acres because that's the multiple-use plan development minimum acreage. However, another acreage of 4 or 3 acres could also be equally suitable. We just, we didn't want to pick one, but a 3-acre minimum, we're seeing that there are some 3 to 5 acre pieces that would be reasonable, but we would definitely not want a 1 acre coming in for, or a half acre coming in for industrial style development, regardless of the FLU.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Mr. O'Donnell, thank you very much for your time this morning. You actually mentioned Sarah, Save the Agricultural Reserve for Agriculture. Is that correct? Okay. And you mentioned that there were 13 entities that were part of that group.
Right.
Can you please name those entities because you don't have a website?
You're right, we don't. Good point. I don't have the names with me. I apologize for that.
Okay. I was wanting to get a sense as to...
it's a mix, if this helps.
Yes.
It's a mix of farmers
yes.
and agriculture businesses.
Okay.
An example of an agriculture business are a tractor repair business, a equipment repair business. Those would be examples of members, a veterinarian firm. Those would be examples of ag businesses versus farming. And farming in our instance includes row crop, nursery, and various types of nurseries, different plants, that type of thing.
All right, well, thank you very, very much for that. I wanted to just get a sense of, as you were presenting commentary on behalf of a group, as to who was behind that commentary. So
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
we actually had all 7 county commissioners come and visit the Ag Reserve under our sponsorship, and so they all spent a minimum of 2 hours visiting 4 or 5, depending on the day, different farms.
Okay.
And that was, they got to understand who Sarah was that way as well.
Okay. Can you detail the farms that they visited?
Well, one was ours, called Irish Acres.
Yes.
Another, Geronimo Nurseries. Another K&M Nurseries, 2 different types of nurseries. And then a tree nursery.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's it for my questions thus far, not
Okay.
for commentary.
Motion to approve or deny agenda item 3A1.
Mr. Chair, I have a friendly point of order. Ms. Amara had put up there's the screen. She had suggested some text amendments to what we were going to approve, and I think that neither of those are objectionable. So if the board wants to vote to include her text amendments and then vote on the 2 issues, I think that would probably be a cleaner way to do it. I don't know what your feeling is on that. I don't think anyone has an objection to including sports and fitness centers and requiring a site plan. So I would want to put that on the record as well.
Are you making a motion now, Commissioner Groman?
I am hereby making a motion that we approve the text amendments suggested by staff regarding Exhibit 1A and Exhibit 1B with regards to modifications of the text that are before us on the screen right now.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Second by Commissioner Pompey. Precious, can we do a roll call vote?
I need clarification.
If I may clarify, I think the way Mr. Groman is treating this as if the Planning Commission, we don't do an add-delete. Basically, what's on that slide is an add-delete. And so essentially, the motion is to accept these proposed modification as an add-delete, right?
Accept that as an add-delete.
Yeah, and that's separate from the recommendation on each individual item. And that's what we do in the Zoning Commission, and that's what we do, and we just don't have that process here. But I don't see an objection looking down if we accept these changes, just modifications as an add-delete.
Yeah, because this vote, you're not voting to approve or
No,
deny.
I know that. As a housekeeping issue, it's a cleaner way to do it because it's incorporated within what we will vote on. So my motion is amended accordingly to reflect this as a staff add-delete for purposes of the final vote on the actual motions and approvals or denials.
Commissioner Pompey, do you still second? All right.
Question?
Is there any question? Yes.
Thank you. I need clarification on this.
So if I could explain, if this was the Zoning Commission, we would have had a piece of paper at the beginning of the agenda, and when you approved the agenda, we would have modified the staff report as part of the package. Again, the first item is the kind of correcting a staff error, and then both items actually are correcting some wording. And I think Mr. Groman's trying to address these housekeeping items separate from the policy decisions. And by recommending approval and taking the motion on this one, all you'd be doing is changing the yellow text on the screen. One is to add a site plan for the concurrent amendments in the Ag Reserve, and the other one is to not prohibit outside recreation in a industrial flue. Both of those are mistakes by staff, so I think that explains.
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think that the amendments that are being proposed today are absolutely essential. At the moment, I have a problem. I'm going to make my motion in a second. At the moment, I have a problem with the fact that we don't have specific definitions as to what the types of uses are that are going to be provided or allowed based on this amendment, and that we need to tighten that up before we would have a vote. In that regard, what I'd like to do is I'd like to move to table this to another meeting so that we can have a full meeting, or at least some full time for us to be able to discuss what the uses were and which ones we would approve. With the respect to everybody here who is volunteering their time, I think it's not something that we can handle today. So my motion is to table this to another meeting so that we can discuss the specific uses.
Table this just for.
There's already a motion on the table at the moment that hasn't.
Call the question.
Well, he can amend the motion, and is that not where you're
No,
going?
no. What I'm suggesting is, under any other circumstances, I would be approving everything except for the uses, which is what I'm concerned with. I'd like to have some time to talk about the specific uses. He was questioning a housekeeping matter, which I have no problem with the housekeeping matter if that's what we want to have a vote on that.
Yeah, there's no substantive. This is a correction of staff's report, and it's an add delete, and it's done customary throughout these
Okay, I
types
just
of
thought we
procedures.
didn't do that. That's what I just heard. We didn't do that.
There's no reason why you can't do an add delete, and this, it's just not an item that's like unique on the agenda.
Then I'll hold back and wait. Till
But
we
if
finish
you
that.
approve
Do that
this
first.
add delete, you still have to take a motion on whether or not you want to do the other part.
I will withdraw my motion for the moment so we can fix that one first.
Is there any additional unreadiness on the motion? All right, not hearing anything. Precious, may we have a roll call, please?
Barbara Roth.
For clarification, this is just for an add delete with the underlined yellow language.
Correct, just a housekeeping item so that when you do vote on the individual, the commerce flu in the urban suburban tier and then on the ag reserve, the housekeeping items you don't have to worry about.
Yes.
Lori Vinegar.
Yes.
Penny Pompey.
Yes.
Spencer Siegel.
Yes.
Dagmar Bras.
Yes.
Glenn Groman.
Yes.
Sarah Pardue.
Yes.
Carly Harper Larson.
Yes.
Angela Van. Marcia Hayden.
Yes.
Rick Stopick.
Yes.
Eric Royal.
Yes.
Edwin Ferguson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Commissioners Pardue and Commissioners Hayden, my apologies. I did not realize you were in attendance today. I'll be sure to call on you for this next agenda item, or at the appropriate time. So at this point, can we now move to the motions that were recommended for our consideration by Mrs. Amara, specifically the motion for the light industrial flu in the urban suburban tier? Can we do that one? Do we have a motion to either?
I'd like to make a
accept or
motion.
deny?
And
Yes, ma'am.
I'll second that motion
What is the motion specifically?
to approve. What you want?
All right, right. The motion to approve is from Commissioner Bras.
I'd like to make the motion to support staff's recommendation
Right.
with a couple modifications. One, that any site over 10 acres must have preservation 60/40 set aside, and that no industrial site in the ag reserve should be larger than 30 acres.
Commissioner Bras, if I may, real quick. So we were talking about bifurcated motion. So the first one would be for the creation of this new commerce flu and then within the urban suburban tier.
Right.
And then the second motion would then be the component within the agricultural reserve.
Okay, so we are just supporting the motion to support the flu.
Correct.
But
So the first motion would be for the new future land use commerce.
Okay, but no specifics as far as what I just said.
Right. So the second motion, that will be the commerce flu specific to within the agricultural reserve. So the first motion is just to create that new future land use.
Okay.
And as an Exhibit 1A, it's applicable within the urban suburban tier. And then the second motion will be for the new commerce flu within the
I make a
agricultural
motion
reserve.
to support the flu.
And I second.
All right. Roll call, please, Precious. Do we have, that's fine. Do we have discussion on this motion? I do. Okay. Commissioner Stoker.
Sorry, just a quick question. When you say that when we create this under 1A, and going back to my earlier concerns about roadways and access and so on and so forth, is there a time frame with which we have to enact this? In other words, what I'm getting at is, and this will be my comments perhaps later, but I guess they'll come now. I just can't get my arms around putting the cart before the horse. And until we have roadways that can handle the traffic, whether it be residential, light industrial, whatever you want to call it, we have a tremendous lag here.
So I'll focus my my response on what we're talking about now. So this would be within the urban-suburban tier. So with or without this new common flu, nothing is stopping someone from coming forward and doing a site-specific request for industrial. So once this commerce flu, should it be adopted, it would be the same process. So nothing is given out by right. It would allow an applicant, if they had a proposal for something that's light industrial in nature, now they would have in their menu of future land use designations within the urban-suburban tier. Instead of going for industrial, they could go for commerce. But it's still, there's the 3.5D test related to transportation, there's compatibility. Everything will still be site-specific. I hope that answers your question. I see what your concern is.
We're coming at it from the same direction, I believe, and I appreciate the candor.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any additional questions before we can call the vote? WebEx commissioners, do you have any questions regarding this motion?
No, I do not.
Okay, all right. Pressures at this time, and we have the roll call.
Barbara Roth.
This is for the first on urban-suburban. Yes.
Lori Vinegar.
Yes.
Penny Pompey.
Yes.
Spencer Siegel.
Yes.
Dagmar Bras.
Yes.
Glenn Groman.
Yes.
Sarah Pardue.
Yes.
Kylie Harper Larson.
Yes.
Marcia Hayden.
Yes.
Rick Stopik.
Yes.
Eric Royal.
Yes.
Edwin Ferguson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, at this time, we have a motion. And again, Mrs. Amara, you said this second motion was asked to the flu within the ag reserve?
Yes, it is in your packet. It is Exhibit 1B, beginning on E5, and this is to exclusively policy language for the Ag Reserve.
All right, at this time, do we have a motion to approve?
I have a question before presenting a motion.
Before we present the motion?
Yes, just a question prior to know how I need to shape it, and it's directed towards
Sure.
the staff, Chair.
Sure.
Specifically for properties west of State Road 7, would these be excluded? Because there was discussion in some commentary that was presented to us, and I just want clarification.
What's proposed for location requirements and such is on page E5, and it's kind of summarized here. This would allow the commerce designation in the Ag Reserve and also limit all new industrial requests to this designation rather than industrial. It would require that the properties front State Road 7, so it could be on the east or west side. Mm-hmm. It would be Atlantic Avenue only from State Road 7 to Atlantic Road. It would require the concurrent rezoning with site plan. It would have a minimum 5 acres unless there was a different action by the board, and staff's recommending a 16-acre preserve. And that would be what we're presenting on E5 unless there's any motion that includes modifications.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to present a motion with a minor amendment to staff, and it would be subject to page E5 under starting section of industrial, line 1, and then you see subs that Lisa just read off going from 1 through 5A and 5B. My amendment would be that number 4 have a minimum. We would change that from 5 acres to 3 acres. If you times 3 acres times the 43,560 square feet that are included in 1 acre, then that would give the appropriate amount of square footage that the lovely civil engineer stated would be required to provide for minimum square footage for warehousing to adequately address deficiencies that individuals could have in trying to promote agriculture, because they need services such as cold storage, cross-docking, packing, repacking, and brokerage services.
Do we have a second of that motion?
I'll second for discussion.
All right,
I'll second for discussion.
that's fine. Do we have any?
So
You have some discussion on this one?
You know, what I'm concerned about, and I understand the small user that this sort of works for that. I'm also a firm believer in minimum lot sizes, so I'm that's sort of consistent with this. My concern is that I think that what's needed and what we're going to see coming down the pike with regards to future uses is a more of the what we call final mile warehouse and distribution centers, which may have a bad name, but they're kind of like car dealerships. I mean, people think that they're intense, but they're not necessarily intense. And so what we have here is, and we all know this, we have all these thousands of homes that are being built. And the thing with those thousands of homes is that they need to be served in such a way as to get goods and services. And the old way of doing that, of getting out on the road yourself and driving around in circles or going to the supermarket, don't discount the fact that people may have their groceries delivered via warehouse. The typical Amazon type delivery scenario. So I think that's the wave of the future. There's a need for warehouses. I just don't know how big they need to be. I know there's an Amazon warehouse in Boca Raton, and it's about 100. Spencer knows it's about 120,000 square feet. I hear it's too small. I mean, it's busy all day long. It's too small. When we get to the point, again, we hear about, GL Homes is building, 3,000 homes here, 2,000 there. All those people are going to want to have those kind of services, and there needs to be a way to service them, including the agricultural side of things where, hey, I want my fresh strawberries every Saturday and that type of thing. So I don't particularly think that it's a big deal to go from 5,000 to 3,000. I think that that we should have the opportunity to go at least 30 or 40 acres on the larger side, because that's what I think the distribution warehouses are going to be needed to service the western communities. And again, it's a give and take kind of game. When you have people delivering stuff, then you're not out on the road buying it, and there is a way to sort of help your traffic scenario. So that's my feeling on that. On my second.
Any other questions regarding the motion?
Discussion on the motion?
Yes.
Okay, just one thing, because this has to do with whether it's 3 acres or 5 acres. He wasn't timed.
Yeah, I
But
know.
that's okay. I'll be less than a minute.
Yeah.
I will be less than 1 minute, don't worry. Because the Oaks, Saturnia Isles, Rio Poco, Tierra del Rey, Stonebridge, Dakota, Four Seasons. This is all residential along 441. It's becoming residential. And expecting it to then become industrial along with all of these residences. There's difficulty getting in and out of their driveways as it is. But besides that, this also, the sustainability principles, managing the development of land and service delivery so that its use is appropriate, orderly, timely, and cost-effective. The issue is that for the 5-year plan, of course, Lyons to 441, but the end of the decade is when they expect Lyons Road to jog to be built out. I think that this needs to be looked at holistically. This is why I'm going to be voting against any motion here today, whether it's 3 acres or 5 acres. this needs to be discussed along with the residential higher density that the Board of County Commissioners asked you to look into, because there should be, for good planning, there should be some options along 441 of residential high density or industrial. How can you designate a land area now all for this industrial commerce without considering the fact that many of these properties may do very well as residential, and people may want to sell, whatever, the farmers, whatever, may want to sell out quicker to residential developer, or may want to wait, whatever, but it should be all discussed together, residential and commercial. So I'm going to be voting against this today, and I'd like to see it brought back together. This putting it together with part one being urban suburban and ag doesn't make sense to me, and I've been on the Planning Commission quite a while. I'd like to see this together with residential, and then we can make the decision how we want to plan out the agricultural reserve for the next 10 or 15 years.
Chair, if I
Yes.
may, very
Sure.
briefly, just to respond, and a good point. So at next month's Planning Commission hearing, the higher density residential will be brought forward. There were two kind of reasons for that. They're both significant topics. I mean, you can see how long this has been. So we did make the decision to kind of break these items up. The other point is, by if this item is approved, you're not putting this use anywhere. You're basically adding to that menu of what could come forward in the future. Similar to here with the location criteria, the higher density residential item will also have proposed location criteria. So it's not as if we're dictating particular parcels will become this commerce or particular parcels will become the higher density residential. It's just adding that to the available future land use designations that then an applicant can privately propose to bring forward. I hope that.
Yeah, there are not that many parcels left.
And if I may just say something with regards to the 5 acres versus 3 acres, I just want to make sure we're not giving people false hope with a 3 acre parcel versus a 5, because by the time we put buffers and there's easements and fire access and turning radiuses, you might not get what you really want out of that 3 acres. You're building, it might not be actually worth building on that 3 acres. So just be aware there's a lot of property development and regulations that go along, and that sometimes it's not efficient to do the smaller parcels. So I just want to just put that out there.
Thank you. Commissioner Barros?
Isn't this supposed to be brought before the county commissioners at their May meeting? So there's really no time to stall, is there? Or table?
Yeah, you're correct. It is going in May, and I can please correct me if I'm misspeaking from our county attorneys, but in the Unified Land Development Code, it does specify the role of each advisory boards, and as I've read it, it's to make a motion to recommend approval, recommend denial, approval with modifications. I don't think that a motion to postpone at the Planning Commission is appropriate, but
I concur, because this is not dealing with a specific parcel.
Right.
The ULDC does not have a provision allowing for the LPA to postpone it.
Any additional questions? Yes.
Can I respond to Ms. Vinegar?
Sure, we're just in discussion on the motion, so
Okay,
sure.
so as the planning director just said, I think what we're doing here is we've got a menu, and let's call the industrial, the steak portion of the menu. What you're saying is that down the road there's going to be, or next meeting, we're going to add the seafood portion. That is the residential. Right, so there will be alternatives. I was under the impression, Lori, that if you had a piece of property and you had the zoning, that you could only use it for industrial. And what I'm hearing is that there may be options to have different land uses for different parcels based on how the menu's laid out.
Is that a yes?
Well, can I
How's
just,
that for an analogy?
Yeah, I get it. Can I respond just back to that? And I understand what you're saying, that there would be options, but maybe if we had the residential and the industrial together, the county commissioners, we may suggest that keep residential on 441 south, X amount of feet from, half mile from the way we did with the two projects at Boynton Beach and Lyons and Atlantic and Lyons. Just because there are so many, it's just being filled in with residential. The south of Atlantic, it's being filled with residential. And look, you've got the swap that is up for discussion also, which would also bring another, if this does go through, that would bring another 1,250 homes here. It's total residential. And putting in distribution facilities among that in these little parcels, there's a 7-acre parcel here, there's a 15-acre parcel there, just little ones, there's an 8-acre parcel. Well, putting that in the middle of all of these residences, it may not be good planning. So if we could see this, we may suggest that maybe within a certain mile, half mile, or whatever it is, of the corners of the crossroads, then maybe that would be industrial, but not the whole length, just opening up the whole corridor. I would just like to have the discussion together, but that's the way it is. And
do you have any additional questions regarding the motion on the floor by Commissioner Larson? Yes.
Sorry to be a late chimer inner, but on the 3 acres versus 5 acres, having spent 50 years in the architecture business, I can tell you, I agree with Ramsey, that if you have a 3-acre parcel, the most you're going to be able to utilize for your building is going to be an acre, maybe an acre and a half, because of everything else you have to put in there, and including parking, which is pretty much a 1-for-1. So I think 3 acres is so limiting, it's going to not be of any value whatsoever. So I like the motion, I just don't like the 3 acres. So.
Would you entertain maybe submitting amending the motion?
May I amend the motion to 4 acres?
I'd prefer to go back to what staff says and just leave it at 5.
So
They're the experts.
So let's just make sure everything is clear. Commissioner Larson, you're amending your motion to change the 3-acre minimum to 4 acres, correct?
That is correct.
Do we have a second as to Commissioner Larson's motion? All right. Hearing none, I'll turn to you, Commissioner Pompey. Do you have a motion?
I will make the motion to approve. I'm not sure how to word this. You're going to have to help me here, staff. To approve as proposed by staff. Does that work, Mr. Attorney?
Wish I was an attorney.
Sorry to put you on the
I don't
spot.
think you do.
Change your mind. I also, not to throw in another point, but also
Okay.
the motion does need clarification on sub-bullet 5, where there were option 1 and option 2. If you wanted to go with option 1, which is consistent with the commercial requirement that the threshold be 16 acres for the preserve requirement, or if you wanted option 2 in the motion, which is the 50-acre minimum.
Right.
But we didn't. But I didn't specify an option.
So you have to pick one.
So I have to pick one.
So
Okay.
option 1 would be the 16-acre threshold. Option 2 is the 50-acre threshold.
I'll be conservative and go with option 1.
And I'll second that.
All right. Do we have any discussion regarding the current motion on the floor? Commissioners on WebEx, do you have any questions regarding the motion on the floor?
None.
All right.
None.
I'm sorry?
They just said none.
Okay. All right. Can we take the vote, persons?
Barbara Roth,
No.
Lori Vinegar,
no.
Penny Pompey,
Yes.
Spencer Siegel,
Yes.
Dagmar Bras,
No.
Glenn Groman,
Yes.
Sarah Pardue,
No.
Kylie Harper Larson,
No.
Marcia Hayden,
Yes.
Rick Stopik,
No.
Eric Royal, No. Edwin Ferguson.
Yes.
Motion doesn't pass.
All right, so now we'll turn to 3A2.
Can we bring up my motion again? If we
I'm
could
sorry.
get a second?
I totally apologize.
And clarify
Yeah.
option 1
All right. What?
with 5. So I'd like to recommend staff's approval for the flu amendment and the ag reserve, modifying a minimum of 5 acres to 4, and going with option 1 under number 5. Seeking a second.
I'll second that.
Do we have any discussion on the current motion? I would assume at this point we wouldn't, so we can just call the vote. Precious?
Barbara Roth.
No.
Lori Vinegar.
No.
Penny Pompey.
Yes, something's better than nothing.
Spencer Siegel. Dagmar Bras. Glenn Groman.
Yes.
Sarah Pardue.
No.
Carly Harper Larson.
Yes.
Marcia Hayden.
No.
Rick Stopick.
No.
Eric Royal.
Yes.
Edwin Ferguson.
Yes.
It's a tie.
Do we have to, I mean, at this point, we've had several versions of this for approval, and they've all proved unsuccessful. Do we have to continue creating motions until we find something that?
Yeah, since a tie vote is a not affirmative vote, so yes, so typically when no motions provided are able to receive a majority vote, then someone on the other side would typically make a motion, that would presumably gather majority support. Because right now we have motions that failed to, so,
We have language in the ULDC that says the lack of affirmative vote by the Planning Commission moves forward with a denial.
Okay.
Because this happened in the past. Bob Banks put that in years ago.
Because typically at past meetings, when a motion, to approve has failed, then someone will make the motion to deny, and then that's what has, but, okay.
But if it's
we
an
don't have
even
to-
split, that would be a waste of time, wouldn't it?
Okay.
Yeah, so,
No recommendation.
as I initially stated, let's move forward to 3A2, Coastal High Hazard Area Updates. Do we have a presentation by staff on this one? I'm sorry, by an applicant, or is this also staff?
This is also staff. This is more housekeeping and nature item, and Maria Bello, principal planner with the planning division, will present this item.
Before I get back. Thanks.
You're,
Oh, your
I can't
mic
hear
off.
you. Your microphone?
Try again.
Oh.
I turned it off. but
Thank
now
you.
turn it on. Now turn it on.
Thank you. Good morning. This is essentially a housekeeping amendment to update the coastal high hazard area as it appears in the comprehensive plan. You may recall from when this item was initiated that all coastal local governments in Florida are required to have a definition of a coastal high hazard area, which is prescribed by the state, and you see it there. It's the area below the elevation of a Category 1 storm surge as established by the SLOSH model, with SLOSH being the sea, lake, and overland surges from hurricanes model of the National Hurricane Center. So that definition is required to be in every coastal comprehensive plan, as is a map of the area that's affected and policies to protect human life, to protect resources, infrastructure, and to protect evacuation times for the community that might be affected by a storm. In Palm Beach County, in our comprehensive plan, we have the definition that's prescribed. We have the map that's required. And we have policies that actually go beyond what the state requires. The state only requires that if a local government has a coastal high hazard area and is looking to make an amendment to increase density in that area, that the impact of that amendment be tested against evacuation levels of service, evacuation time levels of service, and if it's affected, to require mitigation or to not adopt the amendment. But Palm Beach County for decades has actually gone well beyond that and has actually prohibited any density increases in the coastal high hazard area. So in the coastal high hazard area, an affected property can build at its future land use designation, but cannot increase density further through a plan amendment, through a transfer of development rights, TDR, or through a workforce housing density bonus. That's the way it's been for decades in Palm Beach County. So we meet and exceed the state requirement in that regard. So periodically, the National Hurricane Center refines the slosh model and provides new data, and so we are recently in receipt of one of those updates, and so now is the time to update our map in the comprehensive plan. In the unincorporated county, as you can see here, the coastal high hazard area is very, very tiny. It's those tiny little red dots that show up. These are actually insets from a Eastern County map that is in your staff report. We're not showing the whole map because you wouldn't be able to see the spots at all. These are from left to right, from North County. Actually, the first two are in the North County, and the last one is more or less South County. So in the unincorporated county, the coastal high hazard area is so small, not only because of the physical shape of our coastline, which is higher than the counties to the south, but also because much of our coastline is municipal, not in the unincorporated county, and those local governments have to address coastal high hazard area in their own comprehensive plans, and so we do not depict those or address those. In this last update, the coastal high hazard area actually has shrunk based on some refined modeling and mapping through the Hurricane Center. It has gone from, well, right now, under this new model, the total is 92 acres of coastal area that's affected. 17 acres actually fell off between the last model and the new one, and 2 acres of land area have been added as a result of that refined mapping. And as I say, that's significant because if you are in one of those affected parcels, there are limitations on what you can do. The areas that have been added actually comprise large number of tiny, tiny parcels. All of them are only marginally affected, so there was no requirement to notify anyone to let them know, because we consider those tiny affected areas to basically be mapping, due to mapping limitations, rather than those properties actually being affected and limited in our area. So again, to summarize, this amendment is simply revising the definition to reflect the date of the latest update. And we're also revising several references that have happened throughout the comprehensive plan, again, reflecting the date of the latest update, and then updating the map to reflect the change in affected acres. We provided notification of this amendment through the IPARC process, and as I mentioned, no individual property owners needed to be notified because none of the parcels that were newly touched by the coastal high hazard area were deemed to be significantly affected. And so they would not have any prohibition applied to those newly affected parcels. Otherwise, we would have notified the property owners. And with that, staff recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Vinegar.
Yes, I have a question. How does this correspond with the evacuation zones?
The definition that the state applies is tied to the the storm surge associated with a Category 1 storm. That is simply an elevation function. It is not tied to evacuation zones specifically. Okay. Many years ago, the county had a definition of coastal high hazard area in the plan before the state required this definition that was tied to evacuation zones for Category 1 and 2 storms, but that is no longer linked.
Okay.
Commissioner Vinegar, I
had
apologize.
asked- what?
We have 3 public comment cards, so we need to, I guess, hear from those persons first, and then we can pose our questions to staff. My apologies. So we have Arlene Berry. Would you mind coming to the podium to my right? Okay. Arlene Berry. Linda Smith, is Linda Smith still here? If you wouldn't mind, and Drew Martin, the podium to my left, sir. Thank you.
Who's Drew Martin?
I want to be sure everybody gets donuts on their way out. I am getting notices on
Please.
Ag Reserve, and I'm hoping to get more notices on some of these kinds of issues. And I'm going to try to come to more of these meetings. Whatever you're doing, probably with coastal high hazard areas. And I apologize, I didn't do due diligence on what was to be discussed, but I'd double it or make it more egregious at this point, and it'll save you and your future planning commission time if you don't have to come back and do this in, say, 2 years or 5 years or whatever. Just, we're all in big trouble. Thank you.
Mr. Martin.
When do we get to eat the donuts? That was my big question. Anyway, on the Coastal High Hazard Line, Drew Martin on behalf of the Loxahatchee Group of the Sierra Club. You know, I mean, I'd be curious to know how this relates to the beach system and the beach renourishment. And when you build on these areas, and I think, you know, we support the county's recommendations, but, you know, obviously we agree that there shouldn't be any more density. And, you know, these areas are at huge risk. And all they talk about is the Category 1. And, I mean, that seems very limited because now you're ignoring 4 categories of hurricane. And really, the truth is that in the long run, we should be looking at retreating from these areas and not building on them at all. Because what's going to be the damage in a Category 4 or 5 hurricane? I don't see any discussion of that. And so while I support the county's decision to approve this, because I think it is a modest requirement, and I totally agree not to be able to add density because of the risk to the people who live there. But I do think that the county needs to start really looking at this in a lot more holistic way, because a lot of people are building, when they build in these areas, they're putting themselves at real risk. And a lot of people won't evacuate. And that's a real problem. So, I mean, I do think that we're going to have to look ultimately at retreat and moving people out of high hazard areas and what is the cost of beach renourishment and protecting the beach when you allow buildings that close to the ocean. Thank you.
Commissioner Vinegar, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, for Maria Bello, thank you. Just to continue my question from the last time you were here, I was wondering where the rest of the maps are for the municipal areas, and I couldn't find it on the Florida Division of Emergency Management. I can't see these coastal high hazard area maps, recent maps provided. And I looked into that website. The only thing I could find are the evacuation zones, but it just would be good to see the comparison of the coastal high hazard areas with the unincorporated to the municipalities. So do you get any further information on that? No? No? I think her thing is off again.
Sorry, I apologize.
Sorry.
I had the wrong one on.
Okay. If I may, to my knowledge, there is not any place on the State Emergency Management website where this information is readily available. When the first set of coastal high hazard maps were issued in 2009 under this definition, they were disseminated through the regional planning councils, and there was a ton of information available. This time, it apparently is happening through the emergency management infrastructure of the counties, and it's a different thing altogether. We've had other local governments contact us and say, you know, we didn't even know, we just found out, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Now, that explains why I couldn't find any. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So, Ms. Bello, I have a real quick question for you. Excuse me. Is there any correlation between these? Am I able to talk now? do the evacuation routes, does the county have a level of service requirement for the evacuation routes vis-a-vis these high hazard areas?
The county has a whole evacuation method that it employs, but I have to be honest and tell you that I think when this concept was implemented in 2006 for the first time, that the focus was much more on evacuation than it is today. That it's much more of a shelter in place and evacuating only the highly affected populations and areas of the county. So the county's emergency management department receives this same information and I think factors it into their evacuation planning, but I don't know that there is any, again, published comparison or reconciliation of our coastal high hazard areas and their evacuation plans.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from commissioners? Our commissioners on WebEx, do you have any questions for staff?
No questions.
All right. May we have a motion to approve the coastal high hazard area amendment? Commissioner Roth?
I move to approve this proposal, and as a comment, SLOSH has become my favorite acronym. Thank you.
All right. Second by Commissioner Siegel. Is there any unreadiness regarding this motion? Any questions, concerns, complaints? No. Hearing none. Precious, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Barbara Roth,
Yes.
Lori Vinegar,
Yes.
Penny Pompey,
Yes.
Spencer Siegel,
Yes.
Dagmar Bras,
Yes.
Glenn Groman,
Yes.
Sarah Pardue,
Yay.
Kylie Harper Larson,
Yes.
Angela Van, Marcia Hayden,
Yes.
Rick Stopick,
Yes.
Eric Royal,
Yes.
Edwin Ferguson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Any comments from the commission? Any commission members? Yes, Commissioner Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Just as a point of information, I learn a tremendous amount from my fellow commissioners when we're sitting here having dialogue. For people who may not know, we are precluded from discussing items once they appear on the agenda. I am not able to call a fellow commissioner or correspond in any way on that item. I take that extremely seriously, and I respect the reason for that. So, when I come to a meeting, I value what I hear from my fellow commissioners. I value tremendously what I hear from the public. And often it is at that point that I have more opportunity for give and take. When we have the disciplines presenting to us, not necessarily today, but on normal proposals, we are approached ahead of a meeting by a developer, by a land planner, and they may request a meeting with us prior. That's legal, that's okay. I understand for this commission we need not disclose, but usually we say we've met with someone or not. However, we don't really get that opportunity with the public, and that's what I was suggesting before, that it's very helpful to have that give and take at this, the only opportunity where we can do that. I will continue to, one more thing. I consider this an honor. I will tell you a true story. A few days ago, someone said to me, I hope I don't insult you with this question. I couldn't imagine what this person was going to be asking me. She said, do you receive any compensation for what you do? And I said no. Not for this commission, nor for my other activities. but that's not true. The compensation is what I feel I'm giving back, but I don't possess all the wisdom. I need to hear from the public. I need to hear from my fellow commissioners, and I thank you for your indulgence.
Let's just go down the line. Commissioner Larson, comments?
Thank you for the opportunity, and I would just say in a concise way that I echo Commissioner Roth's sentiments, and I value the volunteerism and the spirit of democracy that I see here presented, again, in person, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been appointed to this position, and I look much more forward to dialogue, support and dissent, because I think that it enriches our community as a whole.
Commissioner Vinegar.
Oh, thank you very much. Ditto.
All right. Commissioner Stopek.
I do have to agree. I do enjoy the discussion. I think actually as a courtesy to the public that comes to these meetings, and because their time is valuable as well. And what happened in Glen today, where the person he wanted to speak to, had to or needed to leave. So I get where you're coming from. I do appreciate the need to move meetings along. We've all been involved on boards probably most of our adult lives, where sometimes the only thing that ever gets resolved is when is the next meeting going to happen. So I get it, but by the same token, I enjoy the discussion as well.
Commissioner Pompey.
Nothing new to add that hasn't already been said.
Commissioner Groman.
So just want to take the opportunity to inform staff of what a spectacular job you do. I've been at this a long time. I've dealt with planning commissions and boards and county commissioners and mayors and governors and state and senators for decades. And I have to say that, and I haven't been before you, in a little while, but this is one of the best staffs of any county anywhere in the United States, and I can say that honestly. I love to live in a county. This county is a great county all by itself, but I don't think what happens is that when you guys do the daily grind and you do your daily analysis and you do your daily thing, it just becomes second nature, and you don't realize how amazingly competent and succinct you are. And dealing levels of complexity, we have every single level of complexity. We're not in Arizona. We're not in Wisconsin. The level of complexity of what you have to deal with between land, sea, and air is really something special. So I just want you to know that. Again, I think the staff does a tremendous job, and I'm just impressed every time I'm here and listen to your presentations and whatnot. Thank you.
Commissioner Barras.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Commissioner Pardue. Commissioner Royal.
No, nothing. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Hayden.
I'm sorry, yes.
Any comments, Commissioner? All right, I'll take that as a no. Commissioner Van, any comments? Closing comments? I didn't hear her.
I'm sorry, I didn't have any comments.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Hayden. Have a good weekend. Commissioner Siegel.
Just briefly, with all respect, Mr. Chairman, I'm would like to have a comment about limitations on the comments of board members, to the respect of everybody who gives and volunteers their time. As we just said, I don't think they should be limited to 2 minutes. I realize you'd like to streamline the meetings, but I think our discussions up here need to be as lengthy as they need to be in order for us to get to the issues at hand. And limiting people's time, I just didn't think it felt wrong. These people are here doing a good job. I'd like to have them have their say. That being said, limitations of the public comment. We're trying to get as many people in the public comments done as possible. We know how many commissioners we have. There's only going to be so many comments. I'm just asking if you, I'm not going to tell you how to run your meeting, but maybe we should get rid of that particular requirement.
All right. Mr. Director, can I ask you a quick question? In regard to questions posed to the public, again, I'm going off of the outline that was provided to me by your predecessor. Generally speaking, is it appropriate for us to ask questions of persons that are providing public comment? They're not an applicant. They're not a presenter. They haven't secured time on the agenda. My understanding is that we're not supposed to ask them questions. Please correct me if I'm wrong, though.
Well, I will rely a little bit on county attorney sitting here to the left. What I'll say is I have seen it with Robert's Rules of Orders. There is discretion of how individual meetings are run and at the discretion of the chair. I know different places do it different ways. I have seen local governments where there is some questioning of the public commenter after their comments. Other places don't want a back and forth between public comment at that time. So I know that's not really a solid answer.
No, that is a solid answer.
And
that's your honest answer.
I'll defer to the county attorney.
Mr. Attorney, what's your position on that?
Well, this is not a quasi-judicial proceeding, so
Correct.
generally, you do not question, these aren't witnesses, these are just providing comments. However, Robert's Rules of Order do allow discretion of the chair to, if a commission member has questions.
So this is, I hear what the majority of the board members have said in regard to limiting of your discussions. That's fine. I don't know if you all were appreciating what I said before that. It's not like I came up with this idea out of a box. Citizens have contacted me over my years here saying that sometimes we are a little too long-winded. So it's no need for me to specifically say, hey, Edwin, you were long-winded on this meeting or whoever else. Just understand that the citizens are saying these type of things. And so everybody up here is volunteering. So
We're not getting paid by the word?
I'm sorry?
We're not getting paid by the word?
Unfortunately, we're not. But all jokes aside, I do think we have to strike a happy balance between vigorous discussion and being about moving this business along. We're an advisory board. We're not the Board of County Commissioners. Our role is important, but it's not, I mean, there are levels to this, and we should just be honest with ourselves in that regard. And I'm actually a little upset about how long this meeting went today because I had pledged myself to speak to some youth at Northmore Elementary. So I hear a lot of NIMBY conversations up here, not in my backyard. People speak to their self-interest all the time, and I feel bad that I had to miss a chance to speak to these kids and edify these kids because, frankly, we were long-winded today. I understand that what I'm asking of you all to consider is different than what you all have considered in the recent years. But, I mean, it is what it is as far as that goes. And, again, I have been contacted numerous times over the years about the fact that, yeah, our meetings do go a little bit longer. And I don't necessarily, and this is my opinion, I don't feel that it's necessarily improving the quality of our decisions. Most of us at this point in time who've been here, if we've been listening to one another, we know where most of us stand on specific issues. We know how most of us feel about the ag reserve or the urban suburban. There's no real new information that's being presented. This is not a quasi-judicial meeting. This is not a Senate subcommittee hearing or anything like that. And that's what I was kind of getting at. Why are we querying persons that took time out of their busy schedule to just tell us how they feel? So I think that part we can do away with. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to see it play out to make sure that I was clear on what was being said by Commissioners Roth and Commissioner Bras and Commissioner Groman. That, to your point, County Attorney, yeah, we will not be questioning people who have presented public comments. If there are questions to the applicants or staff, by all means, ask any question that you need to make your fully informed decision on a motion on the floor. And to Vice Chair Siegel's position, fine, I'm also very reasonable. So if you feel that is not appropriate, the 2-minute, understand the space from which it came from, but I will, moving forward, pull away from that. But I do ask that everybody be respectful of everybody else's time as far as that goes. Staff, the people who are watching us on county TV, and the other board members here on the board. Be concise with what you say. Prep. I mean, we only get the packet roughly a week before. I got mine yesterday, but that's a separate and apart. I mean, so there's only so much research you can really do for the next meeting. But also, if you all want to collaborate and speak with staff, they can tell you what's going to be on the May, the June, most likely July, August. So if you want to dig deep and find how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop, do that in advance. Since everybody's telling jokes, some of you may remember that little commercial. I used to think it was the funniest thing as a kid. But we can't do that. Honestly, we can't do that within a week's time. So if you want to research those issues, then research them as you deem appropriate. But still, when we come here, I don't think that we should be having 30 and 45-minute discussions on 2-item agendas. It's just what it is. So I'm saying that in all sincerity and with the utmost humility toward all of you. I appreciate what you all are doing, but I am asking that you all afford those of us who feel something on the other side as well. So again, the 2 minutes is out. Thank you for staying at Mr. Siegel, and I'm sure the majority of you agree that should be out. But we will not pose questions to persons who make public comments. All right?
Mr. Chair, if I may, just sometimes, we dig deep into all the minutia of all of these projects. Sometimes the public do come up and don't necessarily say 100% what is actually really going on. So perhaps staff could clarify sometimes at the end of when someone speaks exactly what really went on as opposed to someone's opinion, because that is.
Then the way it should be handled, Executive Director, would be for us to ask staff, what do you have to say to Mr. Saria's comment or whatever the case may be? That would be the appropriate way to move forward with the thing.
And we can discuss it more internally and kind of refine it a little bit and give you.
That's fine. That's fine. But just so we all understand, I definitely appreciate all of your all's work over the years. I don't want to drop names, but many of you are darn near subject matter experts, it seems like, in this area. So I appreciate that. But having said all that, there has to be a better balance in terms of how we move through the meeting. So again, 2 minutes are out. All questions are posed to applicants or the staff. And with that, I want to turn to you, Executive Director. Do you have any additional comments?
No, that's it. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Attorney, do you have any comments?
No.
All right. Mr. Planning Director, any comments?
Just one thing, I did hear you reference getting your packet yesterday, so I apologize, but I just do want to remind, so we do always email it out, and it is available on the website. So if there is ever an issue, just know that it is out there.
2 weeks in advance? I've never gotten mine in 2 weeks in advance. Yeah.
We posted to the website last Thursday, and
Okay.
we do
Yeah,
email, but I apologize for the hard copy.
Yeah, and I actually haven't been in front of a computer much in the last week dealing with some other things. So I normally get, my staff at the office will give it to me, but I'm not complaining about that.
Oh, sure.
My point was just we normally don't receive the packet very far in advance before the meeting. So that was the only place I was going. Having said all that, motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor? I think that's everybody. Have a good weekend.